broadband connection. I live in Fairbrook. We don't have any phone service. I've talked to Glenn Thompson, or my representative, and he told me that the federal government's putting money into it. I've called Rich Irvin. He said that the governor has signed money to be in it, and supposedly House Bill 2071 is the one that's going to distribute money in here and that. I've called the phone companies. I've talked to Verizon. I've talked to T-Mobile. I've talked to AT&T. Every time I talk to them, they say that we're tripping over township ordinances or something to do with the township. So my concern is for mainly that I want to be able to have connectivity if something happens to me or something happens to my wife. I had a good friend of mine pass away in the township. He fell on his back porch. 3 days later, they found him, rushed him to Geisinger. He passed away. Bobby Ellis, maybe some of you knew him. I know Bill Keogh umpired with him and stuff. So I'm thinking that since we got this money coming from everywhere like that, finally Fairbrook and some of these outlying communities can finally get some connectivity, broadband service. Anything you guys can do to help me, anything I can do to help you, I'd be happy to do, but that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will be talking about matters similar to that in the upcoming months. Okay, we are in citizen comment right now. Hillary, did you want to make a comment right now? I'm not sure. Yeah.
No, only in response to that, and if there is a later time to do that, then I'm more than happy to hold off. Yeah.
If it's brief, you're welcome. If you feel moved, we do have a long agenda. We will be talking about it. It's kind of up to you. Okay.
I will wait.
Very good. And if a citizen, any other citizens in the room?
Yes.
Okay. Please, go ahead and step up to the area. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gary Sherburne, and I'm the president of the English Meadows Condominium Association. And I'm here on behalf of the 59 residents that live, 52, I should say, residents that live in English Meadows. And I'm here to try to get some answers to some concerns that they have relative to the stormwater runoff fee. One of the issues that my residents have, and they're very concerned, is that they talk to their neighbors and they find out what their neighbors paid for the runoff fee compared to what we're paying at English Meadows, and it's quite a bit of difference. And they are asking me why, and I'm having a hard time explaining why to them. Basically, we at English Meadows got charged $189 this year. Each resident got charged that much. Historically, our total tax bill for Ferguson Township was $202, I believe, a year. So getting charged $189 for this one project basically doubled the taxes for every resident at English Meadows. And they want an answer. The other thing that's aggravating the situation is that they talk to the residents in the neighboring condominium associations and homeowners associations. For example, Greenwich Hill is a neighboring condo association, and Stonebridge is a neighboring homeowners association. And everybody they talked to paid a significant lower amount for their runoff fee than we did at English Meadows. Now, there are some legitimate reasons for that and some of it's a misunderstanding. And I think the staff here knows about that, and I know about that, but there's other issues that I have to get some details on so that I can have a meeting with my condo residents and try to explain to them where we're at on this condo fee and why it's so radically different than the ones than it is at the neighboring condo associations and homeowners association. So, in fairness, I have met with my supervisor, Hillary Caldwell, and she was very nice and responded to my request. She came out to our condo association, visited, saw the footprint, the lay of the land, saw the issues that we have, and I thought she had a clear understanding and was going to come back and communicate that to the township staff and other supervisors. And I think she possibly did. I'm not sure because I haven't attended any other meetings. And she told me at the time that she would get back to me with an answer to these questions, and I haven't heard back from her. Subsequently, I've called Bob Modrecker, is that his name? David Modrecker, excuse me. And he has not returned my phone calls on the same subject matter. And I'm not blaming Hillary. I mean, she may have had issues or problems or forgot. I'm just here to tell you where we're at and what happened. So what I would like to get is the total amount charged to English Meadows for the common area at our complex. And I'd like to know how many square feet was in that common area and the cost per square foot that was charged to English Meadows for the common area. And the second thing I would like to try to get an understanding of, the average resident in Ferguson Township, it's my understanding, paid a basic fee of $119 per resident, per residential unit. And it was my understanding when I had initial talks early on with the developers of the fee, that the average impervious footprint for the average resident covered three things. It covered the roof, the garage roof, and the driveway. That was considered the impervious footprint of a resident. So what I would like to know is a breakdown of that $119 for how much of it went for roof, how much went for garage, and how much went for driveway. And that's an average, 119 is an average, so I'm pretty certain they could break that out for me if you could. So those are the things that I need to try to calm down the residents at English Meadows. Right now, a few of them have their hair on fire over this whole thing, and I'd certainly like to put it to bed if I could. So, and I'd like to put together a talk for the residents at English Meadows and have an opportunity to run it by the staff here at Ferguson Township before I present that to them, make sure I'm on solid footing and a clear understanding of what I'm talking
Sure.
about. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So a couple things. We are also going to be talking about stormwater fee after the first year of implementation, I believe sometime in August. For your specific concerns, I think I would put, if I were doing that, I would put them in an email directly to Dave Modricker and the manager. I think you have very specific questions. I'm definitely not going to be able to answer them here or maybe ever, but they will. We can give you kind of general concepts in August, but I think you want to talk more specifically about your thoughts and your concerns. So get directly in touch with them. And I see Hillary has raised her hand. And thank you to Hillary for going out there. And typically we're, next chance we get, we're conferring with staff on these kinds of more technical types of things. Hillary.
Yeah, so Mr. Modricker did send back a pretty detailed email in terms of like how the pricing was broken down, what constitutes as impervious area versus what doesn't, how things, regardless of whether it's technically under the umbrella of an HOA or something else, how that kind of all falls into it. I have the email in front of me. I know that I did share the email addresses of Ms. Martin and Mr. Modricker with Mr. Sherburne, and I'm certainly just kind of a layperson in this. Mr. Modricker is certainly going to have a lot more information in terms of like those sort of specifics that Mr. Sherbringer are asking for. But at least to me, the way that kind of all of that pricing and those different areas were laid out, it does seem pretty comprehensive. So that's what I would say right now. And I would certainly encourage you to reach out to Mr. Modricker and Ms. Martin.
Hillary, thank you very much, and thank you for spending some time with me out at our complex. I appreciate that very much. And like I said earlier, there may have been a miscommunication between me and my understanding of what was going to happen. So I will definitely follow through on what you just suggested. So thank you very much, and I'll try to keep you in the loop if you try to keep me in the loop, and hopefully we can get this resolved. So,
And thank you so much for coming to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary.
Okay, great. Anyone else there for citizens input? Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to approval of the minutes. If there are no corrections or concerns, I would accept a motion to approve both the May 10th and the May 10th the May 10th work session minutes and the May 16th regular meeting minutes.
This is Patty, so moved. Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And we're on to authorities, boards, and commissions report. Welcome, Mr. Ford Stryker with the State College Borough Water Authority report. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I submitted a written report last week. I guess I presume that was shared with everybody. I saw it was attached to the meeting packet. The big news from the Water Authority is they formed a ad hoc committee to look into whether or not they should continue to fluorinate the water for all of State College Borough Water Authority. The ad hoc committee's recommendation, which was 2-1, it was not unanimous, but their recommendation was to stop fluoridating the water. They had several reasons for that. The first was the literature they looked at indicated that brushing your teeth with fluorinated toothpaste provided roughly the same level of cavity prevention as drinking fluorinated water. They found a study that indicated that there was some indication that mothers who were pregnant and drank the water, that their babies might have lower IQs. And they also found some information that if children consume fluoridated water at a higher level, they may be subject to fluorosis. And I'm not a dentist, but I gather that's when your teeth get brittle and get discolored. So as a result of those concerns and just the fact that, they feel like it's really not part of their mission to provide fluorinated water, they're thinking about not doing it anymore. So the process would be, they're going to discuss it at the next meeting, their next meeting, which is this month on the third Thursday, I think. They may or may not take action at that meeting. I wouldn't be surprised if they kick it down to the July meeting, but they may take action at the June meeting. If they decide to stop doing it, they need to go to DEP and request a permit or a modification to their permit. There would be a 30-day public comment period during that. Frankly, DEP is probably going to issue the permit because DEP has no regulations requiring water systems to use fluoride or add fluoride, and neither does EPA. For example, neither Bellefonte nor College Township water supplies put fluoride in their water. So there's two examples locally where it's not done. I have talked to some dentists who don't think it's a good idea, and I had an email today from a pediatrician who recommends that the children that she takes care of get fluoride both from toothpaste and from the water. So I don't think she would think it's a good idea either. But anyway, we'll have to see what the public says. There was a piece, there was an opinion piece that was in the CDT yesterday that was put in by the chair of the State College Borough Water Authority that talks about this to try to let the public know. So I don't know how the board feels about this, but that's pretty much all I know. I'll be happy to take questions.
Thanks, Ford. Questions? Sounds like if people are interested, they can go to the State College Borough Water Authority meeting and perhaps comment. I don't know what their process is there. It's been a while since I've been to one of their meetings. But are they also being held virtually?
Yes, their meetings are all virtually.
Oh, great, great. So, all right. Thank you so much, Ford, for your report.
Okay, great. Have a good
And for
evening,
your
guys.
service. All right, good night. Thanks. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to our special reports. Tonight, we have no diversity, equity, and inclusionary initiative report. We have 2 township and fiscal responsibility reports, the first of which is Miss Cindy Hahn with the CNET presentation. Cindy, welcome.
So I just want to verify, it is not going to be able to be projected?
He can share his screen and project the presentation, and then we can have you visualize it.
Okay.
Here we are. He's pulling it up, and then if it's helpful, we can pull this computer and angle it. so you can see.
I have this paper, I'll just talk right through it. That is fine, that is fine. Hi, my name is Cynthia Hahn, I'm the Executive Director of CNET. I'm going to be reading from my notes on your presentation tonight. And I'm sure you'll understand. I come annually to the township to give you an update on what's been happening with CNET and with the township's programming in the last year or so. And so in 2021, I think the big development of the year was that all of our member organizations essentially needed to go hybrid. And, they all sort of had different ways of achieving that. It is a more complicated process than some might think. And so we had all of the organizations sort of developing their own way of going hybrid. And the CNET staff helped a great deal with that. But that challenge is still ongoing. There were 511 programs produced last year by the staff. That's an increase of about 13% from the previous year. The Board of Directors updated our strategic plan, and one of the new developments was we added an over-the-top platform to the places where people can view CNET, and that is that we added Amazon Fire. So those were some of the developments. We also started streaming on YouTube live a lot more programs, so that right now the councils and the boards of supervisors of all of our member municipalities are streamed live on YouTube. In terms of Ferguson programming, the township sponsored a total of 43 programs last year. That's a combination of both the supervisors and the planning commission. There were an additional 77 bulletin board messages, and we value those as 1/10 of a program. So it's the 43 programs and an additional 7.7 programs made up of bulletin board messages, and that's a grand total of 50.7 programs for the year. That is just about 9.5% of all of the programming by all of our members. It's interesting, 9.5% is the exact same percentage as it was in 2020 of all of our for all of the programming by all of the member organizations. So the township sponsorship is very stable and consistent. The biggest change that happened, of course, was the addition of the Planning Commission meetings a few years ago. And so that substantially increased the township's percentage. But since then, everything has really been very stable and very consistent. I want to remind you that the CNET funding formula is based on a 5-year rolling average of programming. So when we look to determine, for example, what your member dues will be in 2023, we're going to be looking at the time period of 2017 through 2021. The funding formula in its simplest form is simply that if one member were to sponsor 10% of our programming in that period of time, that they would then be invoiced for 10% of our operating costs the following year. So that's sort of the funding formula in its purest form. We are having light shows in here. So the percentage of all of CNET's programming that Ferguson Township is responsible for in the last 5-year period of time was 9.04%. So as a reminder, CNET Channel 7 is where you'll find all of Ferguson Township's programming. That is our government channel. The school board meetings, school board sports and concerts, programmings from Penn State and SCLO Library, all of that you'll find on the educational channel, which is channel 98. We also stream live, of course, on YouTube. We talked about that. And we currently, I think the presentation said 871 subscribers, but since we had a graduation weekend, we've broken 900, so we're about at 903. Our programs, of course, are also available to view online on demand on cnet1.org. And one of the advantages of viewing the programs there is that they are chaptered by agenda item, which makes them very handy, easy to watch. As I mentioned earlier, we are on 3 different over-the-top platforms: Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. So we've worked very hard in the past few years to really widen our distribution network as much as possible. So I went and I looked at the township meetings since January of 21 all the way through the end of April of 2022. And it appears that the supervisors meetings are seeing an average of 92 views per meeting. The planning commission meetings, they're a little behind you. They're at 70.39 views per meeting. And then the supervisors are receiving an additional about 40 views on YouTube. I think that the YouTube views are not as numerous as the views on cnet1.org because of the chaptering, because I think it does make it much easier to watch it from the website when the meetings are chaptered. Remember, these are not cable television views. These are simply views on the website. The cable companies consider viewing data to be proprietary, so I'm never furnished any information about views on cable TV. The only data I can ever provide to you is views online. I thought I would quickly also sort of give you a reminder about, the basics of franchising, cable franchising. The only reason that channels or organizations like CNET can exist is that there are contracts called franchises between cable companies and municipalities. In the state of Pennsylvania, the only entity that can hold a franchise is a municipality. There are not franchises with school districts or county governments or any other entities. It is only municipalities. The agreement that Ferguson Township has with Comcast is you receive 5% of gross revenue from Comcast Cable, the gross revenue that is made by Comcast within your municipality. And so last year, that was a little over $250,000 that Comcast paid to the municipality as their franchise fees. In addition, there is a small fee of about 32 cents per subscriber per month that is put on the bill of every Comcast subscriber in Ferguson Township that is sent to the township, but the township forwards to CNET for all of our capital needs. So you are not using your franchise fees or tax dollars or anything of that nature to pay for any capital purchasing for CNET. Your annual contribution to CNET is only for operating expenses. The capital needs are provided by those small PEG fees on the bills of cable subscribers. So I'm ending all of my presentations this year with some gentle reminders about trying as much as possible to speak directly into your microphone, sort of try to avoid leaning back in your chairs. But probably the most important thing, and Ferguson Township is doing very well with this, but the most important thing is to insist that people who are attending the meeting do always come to the microphone to give their public comment and to speak. That's very important, so we hear what they have to say as well. So I think that concludes the quick presentation. At the chair's pleasure, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you so much to all the volunteers for this wonderful service. Any questions? No questions? All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, next up, we have the Pine Grove Mills Mobility Study. That's Ron Seibert will be presenting.
Well, good evening. Thank you for letting us be here. We're actually going to tag team this one. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Ron Seibert. I am the township engineer on staff. And we're pleased to be able to present the Pine Grove Mills Mobility Study draft report to you. With me this evening is Rob Watts from McCormick Taylor, who's getting set up over here on James's computer so he can drive the presentation as he walks through it. This evening, we're going to briefly kind of overview the study process itself, more take time to focus on what the projects are that came out of the process, and maybe some discussion about the priorities of those and how they might want to get advanced. The full draft report was included in the agenda packet. I hope the board members had some time to peruse that, particularly the public comments that were received after the second public meeting. Those were included in Appendix B. Although there was not a large turnout either in person or online for the public meetings during the public comment period, or that public meeting period, there were a large number of people that did go online, view the materials, and took time to submit those comments. I think there were over 140, if I got that right, Rob, over 140 individual comments that were provided on the materials. So there are, and Rob will mention this, but there may be some members of the working group that are either online or in person. I see Jerry's here, so they may have the opportunity to supply some input as well when we get to the question and answer session. Kind of the goal of this as we wrap this whole report up is to get feedback and input from the Board of Supervisors so that we can take draft off of the final report and then have this as a document, as a resource that can be used for planning for capital expenditures for projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob and let him get started.
Okay, thank you, Ron. I'm assuming everybody can hear me. I can hear myself quite well. Thanks for the introduction. It's been a pleasure to work with the township staff. Thank you to the Board of Supervisors for resourcing this project. Thank you to all those who are listening tonight who participated in the project and provided feedback and input to it. Hopefully you'll see some of your mark here on the study tonight. We're here to present an overview of the project sort of as it rolled out here. And give you an update and then really try to focus in on some projects. We have a few places where we do and are going to ask the supervisors if they have input to almost break some ties that we had in some of the project rankings and prioritization. But we'll try to take you through things at a fairly high level. I'm going to try to cram about 10 months into 20 minutes. So I'll inevitably gloss over something or lose somebody in a concept. I hope we can pick that up in the questions and answers at the end. This particular presentation comes at the end of the study process. It has been 10 months. The project itself was significantly delayed by COVID. We had this scoped and ready to go, I think, in February, right before everything kind of shut down. So we restarted in September of 2021, getting our traffic data, and then moved through all the different process that we use in the mobility study process. Of course, this study was preceded by a small area plan, also called the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan, which cast a much larger net on all kinds of concerns and issues related to many different things in the Pine Grove Mills area. Transportation was one of them. And to keep it as seamless as possible, the mobility study started with those transportation outputs from that plan and basically moved them forward, tried to figure out how they could be implemented and how they could be moved into something closer to design, illustrated so that we could really see what they looked like. The mobility study process has this premise, process, and purpose that's outlined below there. Basically the idea that street space and the space used for transportation, the needs change over time. And even with COVID, we figured there might be some changes in how we view what we want to do with transportation in the area. Are we traveling to work? Are we not traveling to work? And then we review that and move through a study on how we can maybe reallocate space, address conflicts between modes, and even accommodate new modes in the street. And then, of course, the end result is to get a transportation system that's more functional, it's safer, it allows people to move from place to place, and this really is a balanced look at modes. We're not here to, oh, vehicles are all bad or whatever. It really is trying to work out the conflicts and help the entire system work together a lot better. These mobility studies work super well because of the planning partnerships that we have with our project partners, in particular our project working group. It's headed by Mr. Ron Seibert, the engineer, and has the members listed here from our project partners. These folks in large part made all 5 working group meetings, participated in the roadway safety audits where we rode on bikes or walked the entire the streets up and down through Pine Grove Mills. They staffed the public meetings and reviewed our deliverables. They gave a lot of their time during the course of the study, and we really appreciate these folks coming to the table. The study area for the mobility study is the same as the small area plan. That overlap was definitely intentional. You can see the neighborhoods listed here in the Pine Grove Mills area kind of mapped out for us. Those of you can identify your home in this whole thing. And we started out with a map that looks something like this from the small area plan called the mobility map. And it identified several ideas, actually probably about 14 ideas for us to work off of and start from in the mobility study. Anything from pedestrian crossings, the traffic issues with this, potential for a signal at the crossroads intersection where Nixon Road and Water Street hit Pine Grove Road, speed reduction treatments, parking, all kinds of connections for bicycle routes and new sidewalks, new shared use paths, and then connections into the state forest. Those trails and those connections to the mountain being very important to the people of Pine Grove Mills. Well, the first step in our public outreach, and there were 2 public outreach events that we held. One was in October of 2021 and one was later in April. At the first meeting, we simply wanted to vet the ideas that we received through the small area plan. And we searched for feedback. We had a small presentation, I think it was about 20 minutes, but then we had about an hour of interaction with the folks who were on the call with us. I think we had about 20, 25 people on the call who filled that time quite well and told us all about their perceptions of the system. And then after doing our studies and preparing concepts, we came back, and the photo in the background here on the slide is at our public meeting. We did not receive too many in-person people, but we did receive the 140 surveys online, so it turns out that the hybrid system really worked for us in engaging, getting folks to see and comment on what we were doing. The mobility and safety assessments went across the board, focusing on the things that came out of the small area plan. We completed the roadway and bicycle safety audits. The pictures on the right side illustrate those, the folks who were involved there. Data collection of all sorts. One of the first things we did was a traffic signal warrant study for the Crossroads intersection. We looked at crashes, parking, lighting, transit ridership, all ways to characterize the system. And in the end, we came up with a lot of concepts and a lot of ideas. This is a really busy map. I'm going to kind of reconstruct it here theme by theme, and I'll start right in the middle at the Crossroads intersection. There's a star on number 1 because I'm going to come back to that. I'll speak to that a lot more. But we developed 3 different concepts. One that had the intersection looking much like it is today, with enhancements for pedestrians, lighting, and various other treatments, and 2 other roundabout options. Talk about those in a minute. Number 2 was a repurposing idea for the space right in front of the post office. There's a lot of pavement there and some space that we think could be used better by converting it to community space. Second group here deal with speed-related treatments at the gateways. Call them gateways. Project 3 was on the eastern end at Meckley Drive and Banyan Drive. There are 2 concepts there. There's a star there because we'll come back to that as well, so I'll say more on that later. And then on the west end, a gateway treatment and some speed limit change ideas right near the Lions Club building there. This is a set of pedestrian-related improvements, enhanced crossings where we install overhead lighting, new signage, and a system called rapid flashing beacons that are designed to catch drivers' attention a little bit better and increase yield rates. The Water Street sidewalk reconstruction is a project that the township has wanted for a while, and any place where you see the TASA, that's Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside Program, that's a grant program, and funding is available for those projects through TASA, so any place you see that acronym. Next set were a set of complete streets ideas. How do we get all modes to be accommodated and represented in the street cross-section? How do we better accommodate them? Finally, kind of 2 things here. There's parking studies completed in the areas where there is parking, and then the connections to the state forest. And we focused on West Chestnut Street, the end of West Chestnut Street and the turnaround there, and then the Kepler Road kind of pull off a little further up the mountain. And altogether, 13 major concepts. These are just the major concepts. There are about 40 to 50 kind of action steps, recommendations, kind of things to enable these projects or things to think about as they are implemented. Now, I said we were going to look at these two starred projects a little bit more. Number 1, number 3. Reason being, we did not have a true, from the public input, true decision. We don't have a clear recommendation at this point. We'd be looking for the township supervisors to provide input on that, or to tell us, hey, keep them both in there and we'll have to figure that out later. The first area had to do with the Crossroads intersection. This is Pine Grove Road going east-west, Nixon Road to the north, Water Street to the south. And this idea is our stop control option. The intersection looks much the same as it really does today, but with new crosswalks and with the rapid flashing beacon enhanced crossing treatments. And if you're really, really observant, you can see that Pine Grove Road now has a little bit more curvature. The road has about 35 feet of cross-section. We don't need that for 2 lanes. So we're actually shifting the road a little bit and curving it through here so that Nixon Road drivers and Water Street drivers can move up a little bit more and resolve some of the sight distance issues. We're not sure if we can get rid of the sight distance issue and the left turn restriction on Nixon Road. We're going to have to defer that to design. It's just too close to call at this point. But we'd really like to see that, and this is one way we think that could happen. You'll see over in front of the post office, sort of a reshaped area there. Kind of looks like a gazebo. Could have some bike racks there. something that the community could use. That's the repurpose the space. But this is really more about the intersection and how we treat the intersection. This is one option. The other option involved a roundabout. We call this a mini roundabout. That's the name that Federal Highway Administration gives to it. It's a little different from a full-size roundabout like what you have on Old Gatesburg Road, in that the center island is textured, might be a different color, might have a flush-mounted curve, but it's completely traversable. That's what makes it a mini roundabout versus a full roundabout. Vehicles and large vehicles actually can drive over top of it, while the smaller vehicles actually will drive around it. Has many of the other features of a regular roundabout. This one is about a 90-foot diameter type of thing. In this concept, you have many of the same pedestrian crossings. It's shaped a little differently. The implication, though, here is one about right-of-way acquisition, in fact, property acquisition. And that comes up in our comparison when we actually compare the benefits and the challenges. That have a lot to do with improving the pedestrian environment and doing it just in different ways. The roundabout requires vehicles to slow and enter the roundabout at a slower speed. That achieves some of the goals. The stop control option allows drivers a little bit more freedom in just moving through and not delaying them at all. The stop control also does not preclude a traffic signal in the future. There are some challenges, some things that they don't necessarily solve. The turn restriction on Nixon Road being one of them, and the pedestrian crossing across Water Street is extremely long. The challenges for the roundabout have to do with the property acquisition. We did complete cost estimates. You can see them at the bottom. The cost estimate for the roundabout does not include the right-of-way, the acquisition, and the remediation cost. Being that it is a gas station, there are likely underground tanks there, and that's a bit to take on. That's a wild card. Hard to estimate right off the bat. The high cost for the stop control may seem a little strange, but there's a lot of curb work that we'd be doing to reshape the road and introduce that curvature that slows speeds a little bit. There was an idea suggested by our working group that perhaps that could be implemented using line paint. And so you're not committing to it right off the bat, but that could bring the cost down. About 39% of those who took our survey liked the stop control option. 41 selected the large mini roundabout. That's not terribly different. That doesn't add up to 100%. There was another small roundabout option that garnered 20%. We'd like to put this out there for the supervisors to weigh in on and maybe let us know your thoughts during the discussion. The second area where we had a little bit of a difference of where the study landed versus how people responded in the survey is at the Banyan Drive, Meckley Road intersection. And this is also a roundabout, but it's a full-size roundabout. The center island is curved. It's not traversable. It does have a truck apron on it, which is typical for roundabouts, so that their rear wheels can turn in going over it. This would serve as both a roundabout and an intersection treatment and a gateway. There's a green median. The green and the median of the roadway could be landscaped, and this could become a slow point in the network that would reduce speeds in this area. This option also gives you crosswalks on all approaches. The competing idea was a much more stripped down idea, and this came more from the small area plans idea for an enhanced crossing, where we would add those rapid flashing beacons in this area and enhance the crosswalks, add overhead lighting, a very much less expensive option, to say the least, with the enhanced crossing on the right side. 61% of our surveyed folks said they prefer this option, 39% to the full-size roundabout. The cost difference aside, the roundabout really does solve and answer the bell when it comes to a vehicle slow point, getting speeds down, and there's a major challenge with the enhanced crossing option. Vehicle speeds, the posted speed is 45 miles an hour. The actual speeds are around 50 miles an hour. In order to install the enhanced crossing, the posted speed must be 40 miles an hour or lower. That's a PennDOT standard. So that change would have to be made in order to enable the enhanced crossing. Here we really believe the full-size roundabout has a lot going for it. We would like to propose to keep it in the study somehow, but knowing that it was not the preferred option. when it came to the public. I've done a lot of love for the eastern part of our network. I want to talk about West Pine Grove Road and pull out a few concepts from there just to illustrate a few things. This is the enhanced crossing proposed in front of the Ferguson Township Elementary School. This location, currently the crosswalk is on the east side of the intersection. We said, why cross them over and then have to cross the bus loop lane? Why not just bring them straight across? So if we're going to install this treatment, we'd recommend doing something like that. To give you an idea of what a cross-section looks like in this type of area, this is showing the 5-foot sidewalk on either side, the buffer. You can see the poles there with the rapid flashing beacons. Those are mounted on both sides of both poles for visibility. And for Laura's sake, no gooseneck lighting here. We have traditional lighting, and those could be roadside mounted or overhead lighting. Also point out the Sharrow treatment. This is the treatment we decided on for in town. The roadway width is not sufficient to add bike lanes and maintain the parking without taking trees and sidewalk in the process of moving curb around to make the road wide enough. So the Sharrows are recognized paint idea to put on the road to show bicyclists where to be, especially where there's a parking lane. You want to keep them away from the doors of the parked cars that could come open at them. Again, it's a safety for them, and it's safety for giving them a place to occupy the lane. As we go further out Pine Grove Road to the west, the township has secured a grant, one of those TAZA grants, to widen Pine Grove Road by 5 feet on either side, the shoulder, and then paint those as bike lanes to add accommodations for bicyclists. Now, that's great for bicyclists, but it doesn't do a whole lot for pedestrians. So we heard a lot during surveys that a shared use path along Pine Grove Road would also be appreciated out there to create a trail link between Pine Grove Mills proper and the west side. Recreation, functional travel, either way. We heard so much about it, we would like to recommend keeping both in the study. We also looked at where you would put that path, whether on the north side or the south side or alternate sides. And the study did find that alternating the sides had fewer impacts. And we would forward that as a consideration for future reference. Without it being a 12-foot wide shared use path, it may only need to be a sidewalk, since we now have we would have bikes on the road. Finally, on the western end, we talked about the eastern end and a gateway there as a slope point. On the western end, we would also look to implement a slope point near the Lions Club building and the park out there. The pictures below are actually on Pennsylvania Route 41, which is in the Lancaster County area. Those of you who drive to the beach on that route might go through here and see these. This is a speed reduction treatment on either side of their small town. Cross-section shows sort of what you would see if you implemented a median island with narrowed lanes and then the bike lanes, because the bike lanes would be going through this treatment as well. So in the end, and this is a sort of a reproduction of our table 14 out of the report, these are all of our projects, and we have them put into tiers for prioritization. Tier 1 are the most important, most urgent projects. They include the Crossroads intersection, many of the enhanced crossings, the complete street treatments, the sidewalk along Water Street, parking improvements, which I didn't touch on too much, but mostly common sense marking of spaces and updating ordinances to be consistent. And then our enhanced crossing at Rosemont Drive, which kind of sat between the 1 and 2. The Tier 2 and 3 projects were seen as less urgent and less of a priority. Western Pine Grove Road Gateway was our Tier 2, and then Tier 3 for the repurposing option, the full-size roundabout, enhanced crossing option, and then the 2 trail improvement ideas, which do need a little bit more work to really flesh out what can be done there, the ownership and whatnot. So they are on the lower end of the priority. And with with that whirlwind through our mobility study. Be glad to answer questions about this nifty town with a lot of history.
Thank you so much for that very comprehensive deep dive into this excellent study. So thank you. I see Eric Anderson has his hand up.
Thanks, Laura. I will say this right off the bat. I'm a proponent of roundabouts. I've experienced many of them, and there's a lot of benefits above the actual cost. When you put together the cost amounts, you're just talking about installation, correct? You're not talking about the total life cost of a signal versus a roundabout, because there's no operating cost with a roundabout, but you have maintenance costs, you got operating costs, you have even police when there's an accident, people violating red lights and so forth. There are speeders. You cannot speed through a roundabout. You can go only so fast or you'll hit the curb, where you can just fly through a red light. Have you included any of that in your study?
Those, I think many of those things, the speed reduction capabilities, make a very good point. The safety benefits, we haven't made that point as evident as we could. So I think you listed some things there that I think we can include in our issues and challenge, or our benefits and challenges discussions, and we probably should. I would like to update the report with that, if you don't mind.
And specifically, Eric, the costs do not reflect those other factors. It's really just the estimated cost for construction.
Right.
And again, those construction costs, as Rob mentioned earlier, do not include any costs related to utilities or right-of-way acquisition to construct the project. So that would be, as projects would move forward from here to start to capital planning, those would be additional investigations we do to have a better feel on the overall scope of the project for budgeting purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this was a lot, and just our presentation, we're not really discussing anything tonight. We don't really have time allocated on the agenda for any discussion tonight. We will be, I'm sure, revisiting this in the upcoming months as we move into our CIP and budgeting season. So I just want to contain any questions to the, the presentation here. I do have one if nobody else has any. I have an odd question. I'll call it an odd question. In one of your slides, you had a picture, like a sketch of the roundabout at the blinking light. The one that proposed to taking on the gas station there, and the way that the sidewalk was proposed, it was right along the road. But if that property were taken, wouldn't we be able to just put the sidewalk internal to that property to get the pedestrians away from the road? Or am I not interpreting that photo correctly?
No, Laura, we put the sidewalk through the property. It could go, any place there. It could go along the stream if you wish to have, something that was, kind of engage the stream a little bit more. Although, riparian buffers and all that being what it was, we put the sidewalk up next to the road, mostly because it was just it seemed like the shortest, most direct path. But yeah, you'd have some options there if that option were to be advanced.
Any other questions about the presentation itself, which again was really well done and comprehensive? We'll get to talk about these items in the future. Lisa?
I guess I had been, because I attended the last public meeting and so was familiar with the options at the flashing yellow light, and so I'd kind of focused in on the small roundabout. So was that eliminated as a possibility because of preferences shown through the survey, or what was the idea there?
It was number one. It didn't receive the same degree of attention in the public realm. Number two, with a small roundabout like that, you're not able to design the entry islands and some of the speed control features the way we were with the large island. A vehicle could just blow right through the roundabout without slowing down if they really wanted to. And for that reason, I just didn't have a whole lot of, as much confidence in that as I did in the other two options. And being that it did not get as much attention, I think we decided to remove that and then come to the board and let you know about the other two that were sort of still in the mix.
Okay. And then when you said that the stop control measures would not prevent a fully signalized intersection in the future, but the roundabout would, is that because of the physical infrastructure we'd be putting in there, or is that a PennDOT rule that they won't take out a roundabout, or what was that?
It mostly has to do with, if you choose a roundabout, that's your control option going forward. You can tear it out if you want to, but it's an incredible expense to do so. You generally want to make sure you're making that decision with the intent that it's going to have longevity, it's going to serve your needs, well into the future. And you would do a sort of life cycle analysis if you were to approach that kind of decision.
Okay.
If I can interject there
Yeah.
real quick too, Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, if we would go with the roundabout alternative in the interim, the performance of a traffic signal warrant study with a roundabout in place would probably preclude ever meeting a signal warrant.
Gotcha.
Unless we had
I see.
a lot of delay on one of the legs of the roundabout. Is that about right?
Yeah, you could reach a point. Now, keep in mind, the traffic growth is driven by Huntington, Pennsylvania Furnace, and State College on the other side. If you couldn't expand the roundabout to become a two-lane roundabout, which you might really struggle in something like that,
Correct.
you may be looking back at a signal and saying the capacity of the signal is better than a one-lane roundabout. You'd have to go back there. I have to say the context here, though, doesn't really make me think we're going double-lane roundabout anytime. But
No, no, not within the village. I would agree with that.
yeah.
On the long-range transportation plan is the full realignment of that intersection. So any thoughts on how either of those two items would affect that item in that plan?
I would
We can,
imagine
we
that
can, we
And we can
can,
look at that
Yeah, that's a
later.
we
good-
could also,
That's a really good
that's a
question.
good question.
yeah, we could also do, like, I don't know about if that needs to be maybe coordinated, that question with the regions. So maybe for our next discussion, we could integrate that knowledge into our option discussion, perhaps.
Sure, and I'm asking that question, but I want to be clear that I don't think that we should stall on a proposal here, because that is way at the tail end of that long-range plan to do anything through the CCMPO on that, so.
That's a really good question, though, Lisa, that you brought up. Let Rob and I get our heads together on that a little bit, and maybe even talk with some of the MPO staff and get back to you with a specific answer with regard to that. I have some initial thoughts in my mind, but I don't want to put them out in public yet.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for the work, the study, and the presentation. So,
You're very
more to
welcome.
come.
Yeah, I think what we'll do on this end, since McCormick Taylor has pretty much wrapped up the study, I think the options that have been presented, we'll leave them in the final report. We'll probably just take draft off of it. The costs for the different options will be included within that as well. And then that document will be available for board deliberations through capital improvement planning and further discussion about ranking of projects. Unless there's anything that you think board members see right now is like, hey, that 3 really ought to be a 1, or that 1 really ought to be a 2 or a 3. But, this is pretty much what we've got.
I'm sorry, no, if we were gonna have a discussion like that, which I didn't even look at that or consider
Okay.
that because it's not under discussion at all, we're gonna have to probably postpone this. I think maybe having a board discussion on the document when it's done. And then we could talk about those numbers. I have absolutely no idea how I feel about them. I'm sorry.
Very good.
I wouldn't want to, but not that I don't, I understand, I understand that you are all professional opinions kind of went into that, but I just wanted to kind of look at, our priorities, integrate some of this knowledge about the long-term plan, if there is any, and et cetera.
Yeah, and a lot of
So-
the input on the ranking of that actually came from the working group members as well. So that includes input from, all of those folks, not just Rob and myself or staff, it's the other people too.
Gotcha, that
Okay.
makes sense, that makes sense. Lisa?
So just a follow-up question on the timing then, because I think you're exactly right that this is good timing to work into discussions in the capital improvement program. So if we can, are you thinking that we'll plan to have a discussion about these, the top tier, the tier 1 projects, prior to CIP
Oh, yeah,
work sessions?
Yeah, for me, what I'm thinking is, if I didn't realize that there was gonna be any discussion involved, and if so, I wouldn't have left it in reports. But now that there is discussion involved, I just ask Centrise when the next good available time is to have a conversation with our very packed full agendas, on this topic, which I think would be like the next agenda or two, like really try to have that discussion while this presentation is fresh in our minds.
Yeah.
And then, we're on the heels of CIP, like July, so, ASAP, yeah. But I didn't realize there was gonna be discussion where,
Yeah,
on
you're
the
right,
contrary.
Madam Chair. We just have it as a special report for this evening, so for the board to receive the information. And as soon as I receive from McCormick and Taylor a draft, even if it's just the pre-final draft copy, I can send that over to the board in advance of the discussion. And we may, depending on when we receive that pre-final draft, be able to get it back for June 21st or the first or second meeting. Second meeting in July would be late. I think we could get it at the end of the month or early July, depending on when we receive from McCormick and Taylor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our next special report tonight. All right, thank you, Ron. Thank you very much to McCormick Taylor for your work again. Okay, next up we've got an environmental report. This will be presented by Dave Modricker. It's designated grow zones as natural landscapes managed by Ferguson Township Public Works. Dave.
Good evening. Can I share my screen? Okay. And can you see my screen? All right, I'm happy to present, give you a little bit of information here tonight on green infrastructure, in particular at the Township Municipal Building. And I will be brief because I know you have a long meeting, but if you have any questions at the end, I'm happy to answer them. So the initiative, at least at our township building, started as a byproduct of the new Public Works building and the basis of design that was adopted by the elected officials. With their support, we constructed a number of BMPs, best management practices, and GSI green stormwater infrastructure on site. This is the this is the site plan. This is the building, just to get you oriented with southern exposure. This hatched area are the bioswales. Those bioswales extend down Research Avenue and then head south all along Research Drive, extend on our eastern boundary. In the back, this area, we have an area of reforestation. We have some rain gardens in the center, some pervious parking. I'll talk all about these in a little bit more detail. Fuel island protected from the elements and containment from any spills. Some areas that we removed impervious area and put in a pollinator type mix. And we also have something over here called a storm scepter or a hydrodynamic stormwater separator. So the site plan met township subdivision zoning requirements. The stormwater management met the township's stormwater requirements, which I have listed. But in addition to those, we constructed a bioswale, did some reforestation, naturalization of landscaping. I mentioned pervious pavers, fuel capture, rain gardens, and the hydrodynamic separator. The pervious pavement has been in place for some time. This is in the upper parking lot, but here you can see it visually. The rain gardens were repurposed. Here's a schematic or a diagram of the rain gardens with natural landscaping. And some of that landscaping I have highlighted a little bit later. Here's a view from the second floor of the Public Works building. We're looking down toward one of the bioswales. So that when the bioswales were constructed, we eliminated the existing long grass, tilled and amended soil, and planted with a Ernst 183 mix, which is a native detention area mix. And I do have a link here that you can click that will take you to that seed mix. The landscape restoration areas, everything that's not the bottom of the bioswale, after we removed the turf grass, we planted that with an Ernst Mix 153, which is the showy Northeast native wildflower mix and grasses. And again, you can click on that link for more information. So this sign may look familiar to you, and really for the public that's listening or will be watching this presentation, we have signs out that indicate that it is a grow zone. Some folks, at least while it's being established, were concerned that it looked like a lot of weeds, and we do have to do weed management. We've been working closely with the landscaper, the provider, the seed mix, even some master gardeners and folks at the living stormwater lab at Penn State, and we're confident that we'll get this under control. We want it to look right. We want it to function properly, and we also want it to be there to educate folks, about the reasons for grow zones that I have listed, and also, if we expect others to do it, we'd like to show them that we're doing it ourselves. I'll back up and say that sign may look familiar, and I'm going to give the manager, Centrice Martin, some credit because she did help develop a green stormwater infrastructure program, and we had some elected officials interested in seeing some of this in the parks. So you'll see this same sign in the parks, and it's the same sign we have here at our township building. Here's a little bit more of a blow up of the fueling area and the stormwater system. So this is a containment area. Really, the rainwater is directed away from the fueling area, and any spills are contained. And it's a very long path from here where it's contained because we are protecting a sinkhole that's in the southeast corner of our property. And so, this building and fueling station were purposefully put as far away as possible. This stormwater basin, we made great efforts to make sure that it was not overcompacted. It infiltrates. It has a very nice sage low mix on the basin floor, and these banks are planted in the fall. Some beautiful black-eyed Susans and other flowers come out. So this is just a view from the upper parking area looking across the basin. This would have been last fall when some of that reforested area is in bloom. Again, an area that we removed impervious area and planted with a pollinator mix, low mow zone. We're doing some reforestation. There's some of the trees we planted. There's a list on the right of the native trees with an emphasis on native trees that we planted. And also, you can see some of the container plants that were established on site. So the storm scepter really isn't green infrastructure, but it is a BMP. We have this in the bank along Whitehall Road. So some of the storm water that doesn't go to the stormwater basins goes to an underground system and then comes in through this pipe, drops down, sediments drop out, oils rise, water comes up through this baffle and flows out. And very large flows, that'll be bypassed. But we know the first flush is where we get most of these oils and sediments coming off the pavement. So, and at that, I can answer any questions you might have. Or if we don't want to do questions now, at any time, you can get in touch with me.
Thank you so much, Dave. I do have one comment. I wanted to say, I really appreciate you all taking this on, because I know that this is not the mainstream way that a lot of townships manage their public properties. And it's really very environmentally conscious. And I know it's sometimes hard to be on the front cutting edge of things, an early adopter. So I just want to say thank you for that. And Patty, it looks like she has a comment or a question.
Yes, did I unmute myself? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, yes, that's great. Thank you. And is there any chance to use those grow zone signs as an opportunity for further education by having the QR codes on there? Do we make those signs and that sort of thing, especially the ones in the park?
I will take that note, and I would imagine there probably is a way to do that. We've actually been asked by the tree commission when we plant new trees if we can put QR codes on a tag so that folks can come up and use their phone and look up the tree and get some information on what's been planted.
Nice. My question is also about the signs, or it's more an observation or a comment. I know that the region CRPR is now, I guess, not in their 3 regional parks, but in the other municipal parks, asking maybe those municipalities also to do grow zones. So I just wonder if this is an opportunity for our sign to be adopted by other municipalities. So anyway, just a little forward thinking on the whole parks governance thing and how we are 1 but 2 and all of that. So.
I'll just share with you that when the grow zone sign was in design, we actually did send it over to CRPA for review and comment. So there was a little bit of collaborative effort, and it was vetted and, you know, I don't want to say approved, but certainly we had their support to continue forward. So
Excellent.
It's a great
Excellent.
idea. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments, all right. Looks like we're ready to move on. Thank you so much, Dave Modricker.
Thanks for allowing me to present.
Okay, and now we're moving on to COG and regional committee reports. First up is executive committee. And we canceled the general forum meeting. So I think that was our big event of interest. Any questions? Okay, we've got Spring Creek Watershed Commission. Typically this is found in the other committee reports. And do I? No, it's fine. It's fine. Should I skip this or?
We don't have the representative here.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we should.
Yep.
Thank you.
Shorter agenda. Sounds good to me. All right. Next up is Park and Recreation Governance. Okay. I did not get my report in on time this time. I apologize. It'll be hopefully attached to our next agenda as a follow-up, but just a couple points of interest. We continued the same conversation as before, where I don't know if you recall, but like one of the main points of emphasis of really an important progression in our dialogue is we're now really thinking about the regional park system and the municipal park system. It kind of seems very basic, I know, but it's really a very important distinction when we talk about governance. So I'm just going to touch on, I think, maybe 2 things regarding that. So in this discussion, we talked a little bit more about what we want the park authority to do in relation to the regional parks. And I'm going to say regionally funded parks, completely regionally funded parks. And what am I referring to? I'm talking about the 3 regional parks, the 2 pools, Millbrook Marsh, and I'm forgetting 1 or 2 things, but the regional parks, right? So we talked about what do we want the park authority, we came to consensus on one thing. We want them to fundraise. Okay, so now they really don't focus on fundraising very much. A little bit, but not a lot. But we decided that's something that we really want them to do. Previously, we talked about how the authority was formed because COG couldn't borrow money, but now COG can borrow money. So we don't really even know, it's not like they're borrowing money. They're no longer doing that, but we want them to fundraise. That's something we want them to do. Then the other item that we talked about related to the municipal park system. So what do I mean when I say that? I mean multiple municipal park systems. So Ferguson Township has a municipal park system. Harris Township does. Cotton Township, College Township, State College. We all have our own individual park systems. Well, why are we talking about that at the region? Because the region maintains them, but so do the municipalities. So what do we talk about? We talked about how our individual parks committees were really not involved at all with the regional entity that operates our parks. So how there's a disconnect there. So again, kind of seems a little basic, but it's an important kind of way to think about where we need to focus our repair work. How can we make that better? And I guess flipping back, the last thing we talked about that's important relates to the budget and how you can look at the budget and sort of see these budgets. So Park and Rec has, I don't know, maybe nine budgets. I'm not sure. They have a fair amount of COG budget. Some are C budgets, that's COG budgets, and some are R budgets, that's the authority's budgets. All of the R budgets are regional facilities. The C budgets are a mishmash. So we talked about how important it's going to be that we, in the future, line up these things so they make logical sense, and maybe we try to separate those C budgets more because there's a bunch of R budget stuff in them. So that's a lot. I kind of have to keep you up to date on some of these sort of detail but important discerning things with this, because eventually we as a board are going to be asked to make some decisions about what we want this system to look like. So that's why I'm trying to keep everybody up to speed on this. It's a little bit different than some of the other committees. Any questions for now? And I'll be happy to take them offline if anybody has any questions. It's pretty complicated. So. Okay. Seeing no other questions. Human Resources Committee, Tiara, anything you'd like to highlight?
Yes, just like you, Madam Chair, I will attach my agenda to the following meeting. Actually, there was nothing that was too different or pertinent. I would say that we are getting all of the descriptions for the jobs. One of them that they will be bringing back is the fire director, because there were a couple of things that weren't really clear. And so they'll be bringing that back. And there was a lot of discussion on COLA. For those who don't know what that means, that's cost of living adjustment. And that honestly took up a lot of our time. There was no decisions made, but we had a lot of discussion on that, as well as the matter of the wage that the library workers are being paid, and the new position that they're trying to have, and having that gap in between. So a lot of our conversations, some of them seem to go towards more state issues a little bit, especially when we talk about minimum wage and paying. So I will keep everyone posted. If anyone has any questions, I'm willing to answer. But that was mainly our conversation, and I'll be sending that report. So.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Okay, let's go ahead and move on. I believe Lucy is next. Yes, the land use and community infrastructure. Is that it, Lisa? Okay.
That's it.
Land use and community infrastructure committee. Still getting used to that new name.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to highlight?
No, I attached my report. I really had nothing to add to it.
Great. And Patty, did you want to, I know the facilities isn't in here. Didn't facilities meet this morning, was it? And is there anything that we need or want or should know?
Nothing urgent, just some of the discussion around the SIP and the 6 to 10 year projections, et cetera. That sort of thing is being kicked over to finance and executive, but other than that, no, my report will cover it next month or next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. No other committee reports, and we're on to staff reports. Manager, would you care to highlight anything from your report?
No, I do not, Madam Chair. I have a manager's report included with the agenda packet. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the board for the manager or any other staff members? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move on to unfinished business, where we have the continued discussion on amending the Township of Ferguson Municipal Code, Chapter 16, Park and Recreation, and this will be introduced by Ms. Centrise Martin.
Chair, you may recall at a regular meeting held on March 15th, the Board of Supervisors approved the adoption of a text amendment to Chapter 16, which primarily was to support the addition into our ordinance that would allow food trucks permitted by Ferguson Township. And while we did change the language and we did update to provide some language that provided that flexibility, there were still areas to which the board expressed at that time that continued conversation, discussion should happen at a future meeting. So provided with the agenda is a very detailed description of what took place on March 15th, specifically what items were amended in what sections of Chapter 16. And this is, I've provided this detailed description just to kind of refresh everyone where we once were, just in March 15th, though sometimes it feels like it was many moons ago. So we can continue that conversation, and with the goal to understand that while we have recently, you may have seen in the news, issued a press release to, encouraging folks to be more aware that we have food trucks now available in the parks that are being permitted by Ferguson Township. And also just encourage that opportunity for the vendors that have interest in being sure that we are creating a process that has a little bit more ease and allows for our planning and zoning department to manage that process, but also issue that permit. However, the caveat there is that while we were able to have some really productive, positive, collaborative conversations with Center Region Parks and Recreation, which I'll reference as CRPR, and we have decided and put into action actually that all applications will be submitted to the township, processed and issued, processed by our planning and zoning department, which then will issue the permit. It's not actually explicitly written into our code at this point in time. That what we amended earlier in the year was just to suggest that, or just to state that we have the flexibility, that there's increased flexibility that allows for Ferguson Township to have more ownership in the decision-making process, and that the entire authority is not limited or directly vested with the CRPR director. So we were successful and able to do that. Now I open it up for the board to continue that discussion, and I'm here to answer any questions. Also with us is Jenna Wargo, our Planning and Zoning Director, who can also provide assistance in this discussion if needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Centrise. Yes, all probably recall that we had a brief discussion about this when we did as Centrise mentioned, the most recent zoning amendments. Why it's back on the agenda is just at least in my mind, it's pretty broad narrative, but I think that the goal of tonight, for me anyway, is to align Chapter 16 with what we've already done in the zoning chapter in terms of food truck permits. But we don't need to say food truck permits. It's something much more basic, just amending the ordinance so that we allow ourselves to issue a permit. So the way it's written right now, we don't allow ourselves to write a permit in our parks, even though we're going to be writing a permit in our parks. So it's important to align this. So that's my, Tiara, yes.
Just a quick clarification, so what do we define as food truck? I feel like I've slightly asked this question before, but I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yes.
Because I know what a general food truck is, right? Yep. Are we also saying that, the trailers, if someone hooks a trailer to the back of their car, is that considered a food truck? Is it only if it's propane? If somebody has like a little cart, but it's not electric and maybe they pre-baked things, is that considered? I guess I'm just trying to make sure I understand exactly what we're considering food truck. Does it have to do with the propane, or is it just wheels, or what?
It's a good question. I don't know if
that, I think that definition is found in zoning, and I don't think we'll find it in this ordinance, but if anybody knows, Jenna or Centuries, just to let it, I know we had this discussion, I don't remember, I don't remember what we ended up, not we, but like previous we, had at one time discussed this definition, back in the day. Jenna, did you want to, either if you have it in front of you or in your mind,
Really, the alignment was with the state definition for this change, so we changed it to a retail mobile food facility. So where mobile units including food trucks, trailers, stick stands, carts, and other similar structures that are mobile, transitory by design, in which food is stored, prepared, processed, distributed, or sold, that is a mobile food facility.
Okay, thank you, Jenna, because I definitely wouldn't have thought of a cart as a food truck, so I'm glad, thank you for saying that.
And previously, we didn't either, so.
Okay, so basically everything except somebody walking around with like the hot dog thing, that's not considered a food truck, but everything else would be, right? You know what I mean? The things you
if
put
they're
on.
on an electric bike, then I'm not sure.
On a bike, yeah, but if you're walking and they have that, that's technically not, that's not a food truck, but everything else.
That's a peddler, but yeah.
Got it, okay, great.
So this will be also, the focus here too will be chapter 16, which is devoted to park and recreation, whereas zoning, is where you find the definition of food truck. So what we want to do now is just make sure that the things that we find in this other chapter of our laws or our code don't conflict with what we just did in our zoning chapter, which they do. I mean, they conflict with our intention, which was to have Ferguson Township issue the permit. So let me give a specific example of the language that I see needing to change, and then it will probably maybe be more clear if it's not already clear. So, for example, right in the definitions, the definition of permit, we define it as any written authorization issued by or under the authority of the Director of Park and Recreation permitting specified park privilege. So we define a permit as having to be issued by CRPR. That's not correct, though. A permit doesn't have to be issued by CRPR, and in fact, we're going to be issuing said permit. So as we just, there's probably maybe 3 places, I think, in this that relate specifically to us being able to, by our own ordinance, give a permit to a food truck in a park. Now, why didn't this ever come up before? Food trucks weren't allowed in parks, as far as I understand it, right? We allowed them now in parks, or by our code anyway, even though they'd sometimes, anyway, let's not get down into the weeds there. But now we're gonna try to align this part of our code with the other part of our code. And I remember now it's mobile, Mr. French Fry, mobile retail food facility. That's how I remembered food trucks. Anyway, so permit, any written authorization issued by or under the authority of Director, Park and Recreation, or Ferguson Township. Or if Jenna, who writes our code, has a better way to say what a permit is, I would certainly want her to do that. But in my layperson fix of this, the way I fix this code to include Ferguson Township is to simply include Ferguson Township. To me, that fixes it, even if it's in a kind of a non-professional, messy way. Tiara.
About the permits, will each food truck or vendor or whatnot have to have the same exact requirements, or will it be based off of the type of truck that they have? Like how are we doing that? Maybe somebody with a cart is, of course, different with an actual truck. So like, are the permits the same? Is there a certain one that they all have to have and then additional ones for people with, I mean, or is it just all going to be universal?
So currently the differences I would say right now are between the right of way and parks, and that's more of the requirements of the permit. It's all the same permit application, it's all the same permit being issued, but because of the location in a park or in a right of way, there are additional checks that we at a staff level need to do just to make sure that there are no issues arising from that
Like the
application.
background check, for example, would a background check be a requirement of a permit for parks, but not one for right of way? So that would be like, or is it both? Okay, both.
And none of these permits have to do with like the like safe serve and other permits that individuals have to have, like that completely separate, and this is just for them. Okay. So they have to already have all those before they can even apply for ours, correct? Okay.
Yeah, and that's pretty basic requirement of anyone serving food in the center region.
Yeah.
State, even, I think isn't that state safe serve? Anyway, again, don't want to get into the weeds, but yes. Hillary, did you?
Yeah, no, and this might just be me like not really fully grasping the differences between like the Ferguson Township park system versus the CRPA and things like that. For me, when I hear there might be multiple portals for folks to have to go through to register their food truck or whatever it may be, like we'll call it a food truck for now. For me, that creates a barrier in terms of like folks being able to actually accomplish that. And so like, I don't know if there is a way for us to, increase our communication with CRPA in terms of like, hey, if you are going to be the permit holders for all of the different park systems, as well as the center region parks, to just make it easier and like remove barriers for folks to be able to get engaged with that sort of thing. If that is something that is able to be done, I don't know if that's of interest. For me, if I was like, yeah, I want to like bake a bunch of cupcakes, which I love doing. Like I love baking for folks. But if I want to like do that and then be at a park somewhere, if I have to go through like multiple different options or multiple different portals, that's just creating a bunch of barriers for me that I don't think I would engage with. And then you're like, are you losing out on opportunities with small business owners? Are you not engaging those folks? So it's just like, if there's, I hate this word synergy, but like, if there's a way to make this a situation of synergy where we can like actually coordinate with an umbrella organization that can function and like actually provide the permits for all of these parks, that would be incredible. Okay, I'm done.
That would be. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head wanting to streamline it, and that's kind of where this conversation started. So in order to operate a food truck in Ferguson Township, you have to have a zoning permit. So then when we actually said, well, you now also have to go to CRPR and get a permit to be in a park, we said, let's just say, let's wrap that into that zoning permit process so it's a single shot. I don't know if other municipalities allow food trucks in their parks. I think State College Borough does, but I don't know about the other ones. I think that given the response to us moving forward with this effort, people are overwhelmingly positive. I think you will see a regional effort moving forward to do something like that. But because those zoning permits come not regionally and municipally, the streamlined process ended up being through the municipality.
And that is really the goal that Centrise and I approached with Pam, was having that easy process amongst all of us, that collaboration. So currently with our permitting systems in place, we are updating out of Munis into Tracer. So ideally, when we make that switch, this will be a lot easier for us all to collaborate together. But for right now, everything for Ferguson Township will come to the Planning and Zoning Department. Anyone on staff knows if there's a permit for a park, they are to forward it on to CRPA. So they are aware of when, where, what food truck, etc.
And just really quickly before we jump into Tiara, I just want to make sure like that is super clear for folks on a website. If they call the office, like I just want to make sure that is like super transparent.
Ms. Wargo was saying, I also just want to provide a little bit more feedback and an update. With COVID, what we saw is the industry within, for food trucks really evolved, right? And so the process that Center Region Parks and Recreation had previously, and when I say previously, just last year or since the last time that they were issuing permits pre-COVID, the process was through an RFP. So CRPR would issue a request for proposals, food trucks that had interest, they would respond, and then they were just eligible food trucks that had already been vetted and through the CRPR process that then could be contacted to provide services as part of a pavilion rental. So that created, to your point, Ms. Caldwell, that kind of created a little bit of, some additional layers of work. And we also had a preventative point where, only if a pavilion rental had been established would then, with the option or interest to have a food truck, could they then be at a park. Previously, we didn't have parks at a food truck. So what the Board of Supervisors for Ferguson Township, again, kind of leading with this cutting edge approach that we're just going to create less steps in the process and allow more options to have food trucks in the park. So we were successful at sitting down and having, I think, near a 2-hour conversation with CRPR Executive Director Pam Salikankis, Jenna and myself, and we were able to talk through ways that we could be collaborative and be able to do this in such a way where it didn't quite disrupt CRPR's process too much, but gave us the flexibility that the board had expressed wanting to have when we made those amendments. And so I think what, I heard Madam Chair kind of express is that, in the future days, for example, if Jenna, Pam, and myself are not here, that collaborative approach that we have in place could be washed away. And so being able to have written into our ordinance very specifically that the permit is issued through Ferguson Township that still allows food trucks to be at a park through the process that we've created to be a little bit more easier to participate in is, I think, the overall point. And I'll look to Madam Chair to kind of weigh in at that point.
Yeah, no, this is a good conversation, correct. Tiara?
Yeah, I don't want to prolong it. I think we've been going along. I just want to ask 2 questions. I don't think we said it, but how much would this permit be and how long does this entire, like what Hillary just said, let's just say, because I might be wanting to really do a food truck, actually. So if I want to just start off, and let's just say I'm starting from the ground, I know I have to get my personal EIN number and all that other good stuff. But when I get to this point, okay, I want to do this, how long does this process take? Like, how long would you tell someone it takes? And how much is this specific permit that we're talking about right now? And that's it.
I also want to contextualize this too in the shift we're making. So there was a previous way through CRPR that would have required you to compete in their RFP, complete their RFP process, and then give 10% of your profits to them. And I'm not sure how much the cost was. In this process, it's a one-time fee. If I remember correctly, please correct me, manager, if I'm wrong. A one-time fee, it used to be annually, but we changed that recently. It's one time of $25 for the township. And then it's $0 for renewal. But the other things like the Safe Serve and the whatever through the health department and all of it, that's not about us. So the part that's either about us or the region, which now it's going to be about us, we hope, is the difference, right? And what I'd like to see, honestly, because I sit in on the authority meetings and they're always talking about how they can't get concessions at their parks. And I was saying, I work with food truck owners, and the percentage you're asking and the process you're requiring is it's difficult for them to. So I'm hoping that us doing this better process is even a model for them, and then there's realignment again. But for now, we're going to hopefully move forward with kind of doing this streamlined process, so we have more of this kind of business and an ease in serving our residents that really are looking for these kinds of options, so. And now, how long would it take for the Ferguson portion to get the zoning permit for the food truck and to go into a park? Centuries. Get the zoning permit, go into a park.
I'll look to Jenna to confirm, but I believe we have established 14 days, or maybe we've given ourselves 30 days, but we expect it could take up to 2 weeks. Jenna?
We are allowed by ordinance 30 days.
There we go.
It's
And that's
never
for,
taken long.
that's for any zoning permit too. I just
Any
wanna
zoning permit.
keep like seeding our knowledge in the context. It's not longer for food trucks because food trucks require a zoning permit.
Yeah.
This process takes up to 30 days. So if I want a shed in my backyard, up to 30 days. If I want to do an addition, up to 30 days. If I want to, that is the same. And then the park portion though, like let's say you already have your permit to operate in the township. And then you want to go do it in a park. That's a separate process. Is that also have a timeline if you weren't to do it concurrently, you know, if later you decided?
I wouldn't say separate. It would be in addition to your current permit that you hold. So what I'm showing right now is our updated application for mobile food vendors. All mobile food vendors, no matter where you are operating, needs to fill out this application. The first page, you'll see down here at location, this is where they ask about the right of way or a public park. And that's where additional information may be required if that is the case. If it's not the case, then we summarize essentially down here what is required with each application. So if you are choosing to operate in a public right of way or a public park, there are additional requirements with that. If you are not doing any of those things, then it's just these top bullet points. So we've just experienced for our ABC dinner, actually, the food vendor wanted to service that event. It was originally a 2-deck park. So she didn't have the PA State Police criminal record check. That was an instant background check for her. She did it that day, and I had a copy of it by the end of the day. It did not take long. The longest one was the PA Child Abuse History Certification. And I'm trying to remember the day she submitted, and I think the issue is that the reply was via snail mail as opposed to electronic reply. And that was really the issue, was the PA Child Abuse History Certification. So I would, if looking back on my emails, I would estimate it took over a week, maybe 2, for her to get that confirmation that there were no issues there.
Yeah, and I certainly I don't want to overstep that. Like, I've had to apply for like the PA Child Services application several times before, and it's always been electronic, and it's been pretty quickly. So like, it's totally cool if you want to like set that like week or like 14-day precedent. But for me, at least, it's been pretty quickly, and it's been electronic.
So also, just to contextualize this, I'm using that word a lot, and it's probably not even the right word, but so we're evolving from a process whereupon there were still previously all these zoning requirements, because that's a requirement for a zoning permit. And then there was CRPR requirements that also didn't fit into a permit schema. They were like an RFP that required a percentage of a profit, and also the background checks, et cetera, et cetera. So we're morphing them into one in the township and saying, and we'll also do the background check for the parks, but we decided we're gonna do that in the right of way anyway, think it's a good idea, et cetera. So we're just streamlining all of that into one process. And then what we're doing tonight is, because we have this old code that says that we don't write permits for our parks, which already I question. I think we write permits in our parks that aren't about food trucks. But anyway, when we look at this code,
it is written in a manner that doesn't acknowledge our authority to do that. So we decided we want to streamline the process, but in here it says the definition of a permit excludes Ferguson Township, right? So when you're doing law, you have to make sure everything aligns. So not that we're going to get into litigation over this, but just the idea is you want that to be consistent. So if Ferguson Township is going to write a permit that has to do with something in a park, we should be acknowledged under the definition of permit in addition to the Park and Rec folks, because they also permit things for parks. They permit soccer field rentals, they permit pavilion rentals. We don't want them to not be there. We just want to add us into that. So again, I'll ask Jenna, do you see the definition of this, how it's written? It's unique. I've never seen a permit defined in that manner by like the issuing authority in that manner. But you know, maybe I'm not a zoning director. But you can see the issue that I'm talking about in that sentence, correct? Like,
Yes,
okay.
and it's my understanding all the municipalities have the same matching ordinance and that was written by CRPR. So typically if no definition is provided, you always default to your zoning ordinance. So they specifically called that definition out, which we do in some ordinances. You'll see it in our workforce housing ordinance where it's specific to those requirements, but that's an easy change that can be made for this.
So tonight, just in the interest of time, right? This is a code. There's a lot to look through. There are several details. I'm going to try to hit them really quickly here. But what I would like the board to do or to consider is that maybe we ask staff to come back with a draft where they integrate this streamlined permitting process that is enabling Ferguson Township to be a part of that into this ordinance and then bring it back to us for a read through. So basically, so we don't have to go through each one and kind of back and forth and, oh, does this sound good? Or does that sound good? It kind of is probably not the best use of our time. So where I see problems of omission, I'll call them, first is under permit, the definition of permit. The next is under, just scrolling down here, it's actually not. Okay, it's under section 16-107, page 7. And it's here it says, number 1 is a lot of lead in, yada yada. The director of Center Region Park and Recreation Department shall have the following authority. And then C, to issue permits under uniform conditions to be prescribed by him, to issue permits for regulated uses as herein before enumerated. Again, not that we're not having Park and Rec have the authority to issue permits, but I don't know if this section needs to be changed if we change the earlier section. Because this, again, it's not exclusive to CRPR. So I believe if we were to define permits as including Ferguson, we wouldn't have to change that section. But Jenna, that's what I wanted your advice on. But that is an area that may need to be adjusted if we want this streamlined process going through Ferguson Township. I am sure that the definition would need to be changed. I'm trying to not fiddle with this a lot because then my next ask of the board, there's a lot of issues with this ordinance. It's really out of date and just, we had a subcommittee look at it before. And they identified some issues with it, but we never fixed them. So one thing is like, look at the definition of a police officer. Within the definition of a police officer, you have, or any employee of the Department of Park and Rec appointed as a special police officer for the purpose of the enforcement of law under an order within parks. So no, a police officer is a police officer. We're not giving some kind of some kind of police officer authority to just a Park and Rec employee. They're not trained, they're not, so what's my point? There are multiple places in this ordinance that need to be changed or fixed. A previous subcommittee identified some, and there's still work to be done giving the Park and Rec Governance Committee at the regional level. So what I'd like to suggest, in the interest of time, is twofold. One, we ask the Planning and Zoning Director to just specifically target those two areas that I identified and any other areas that relate to issuance of permits, and to bring us back a clean draft with track changes to identify where we need to change to streamline that process. And two, if we could think about, which the manager actually suggested this to me, she's been following some of the stuff that's going on at the Park and Rec Governance Committee, at the regional level suggested, and that's why I'm suggesting it, because I wouldn't suggest any use of staff time had the manager not mentioned it to me. But that we develop a subcommittee with a Park and Rec committee member, perhaps, if they're interested, a staff member, a board member, and before the police were also on the ordinance subcommittee, whomever the manager thinks would be appropriate, that we could form a subcommittee to look at this and come back with some recommendations to the board for changes. So that's kind of the two part A and B path that I'd like to see us maybe take to move this forward and move on to our next agenda item. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Concerns, questions, additions? Lisa?
Sorry if you mentioned it. I heard you say section 16107. I don't know if you did say 16106 also, but I just wanted to mention that under number 1, the permits, and then under number 5, selling concessions, to look at those areas also, because they might need some adjustment.
Oh, yeah.
And then under number 1, it does reference if a permit is revoked and where the monies go that are forfeited from a revoked permit. So just something to probably look at as well as we're walking through those changes.
Thank you, Eagle Eye Strickland. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. Any other thoughts? Centrise, would you prefer a motion, 2 motions, 1 motion?
Yeah, I think a motion, Madam Chair, would be good. I think motion 1 would be something along the lines of that the Board of Supervisors move to direct staff to draft a amendment to Chapter 16 with a focus on issuing permits. And I think that would suffice, and that would allow for us to move forward. And then when we brought it back to you, if you wanted to add to that motion, also to then, trying to think about getting ahead here and authorizing for advertisement. But I think just bringing it back, if the board is satisfied with us just bringing back a draft for review, then we would motion for, or we would ask the board to consider motioning for authorization to advertise, so.
Okay. Okay, so, I'll try that motion if nobody else wants to. I'll move that we ask staff to make an amendment a draft amendment to Chapter 16 to integrate the authority to issue permits in parks of Ferguson Township.
Perfect.
This is Hillary, I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes unanimously. And then can we do the subcommittee motion? Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would
Uh,
recommend that it would maybe sound something like that the Board of Supervisors move to direct staff to form or organize a subcommittee comprised of members of the board, Parks and Recreation Committee, and staff. And then
Okay.
that'll be enough to get that moving forward.
Okay, I'll restate that motion. So I'll move that we ask staff to organize a subcommittee comprised of staff, Parks Committee members, and board members, and anybody else they feel is good, just giving you some leeway there, Centuries. To form a subcommittee to look at Chapter 16 revisions, and bring back some recommendations.
Yes, to the board for
To the board.
consideration.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on that motion?
Sure. Do we have a, like a deadline or like a projected date of the information by?
For this one, no, I don't think so. Centuries, what do you think?
Yeah,
For
I
the
think,
other one, soonish. This one, probably not. Yeah.
I think that's a great question. Right now, of course, as I'm sure you all know, we're balancing a lot of competing priorities. I think it would be appropriate for, I think, a 3-month review process, that would allow for perhaps 2 to 3 meetings, maximum. I think that's all that we would need, and possibly less, depending on the subcommittee members' availability or comfort level to just utilize email for communication. So I would estimate a 3-month time period for this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes unanimously, and are we okay to move on to the next item? Yeah.
And maybe this is out of
Yep.
turn, but I would just love to propose like a 5-minute recess for
Yep.
folks to be able to like go to the bathroom,
Let's
get
do it.
tea, get water, go do what they need to do. We have a lot of stuff ahead of us. And I am so excited to be engaged, and I just want to make sure that folks are, ready for that.
Absolutely. Motion to recess, and we'll see you back at 9:10? 5 minutes, or, okay. All right, thanks.
Oh, right. I'm so sorry, Cindy. I got a solution, but it was like at the tail end of our in-person agreement communications. But the docking station is failing. So once I realized, it was interesting because I could use the power button to turn the projector on and see the docking station, but this is the docking station. It allows for us, you would have one, right? So what wasn't working was this goes into our system, our AV system down at the bottom, which is why, in case anyone kept seeing me going under. Yeah, I saw you going. Because our, like, what is, honestly, crawling up the stairs. I didn't realize, like, the optics of that and how it looked to anyone online. Like, I was just like, yeah, no, it's because our whole system is tied into the floor. This is actually our false floor crew, so anyways. And then, but what kept, I was like, no, I can't do a docking station for free. This needs lights up. But as I looked at what I realized that I can't figure it out. And of course, we have a room full of people, probably the most in-person we've had from the public. Right. So I'm frustrated, I'm upset, and I can't get it figured out. I go under the table, I come back, I go under, and then all along it was. So when I went to my office, I unplugged everything from my docking station, and I also grabbed the I absolutely remember. I don't know why. Just you know why. It's so immature. Don't say you don't know why. But like it just like I just am like, oh my gosh, like I feel anyway, so I grabbed the dongle and my docking station from my office. Wires are thrown everywhere, but I was like, I'm gonna have a plan B in case plan A with the dongle doesn't work. So glad that's in the past. I wish you would have told me like that. Well, I did. And then I know. I was like, it's fine. We're fine. I'm fine. It's all fine. We're good. Meanwhile, I'm like, oh my God.
Good suggestion. Those 5 minutes go so fast. All right. Let's go ahead and dive back in here. And we are up to the zoning ordinance text amendment application, Terrace Streetscape Zoning District and Source Water Protection Overlay District requirements, introduced by Jenna Wargo.
Thank you. On May 11th, Pamela Steckler submitted an application for a text amendment to the Terrace Streetscape zoning district. The board received the application at the May 16th regular meeting and referred the request for further review to the Planning Commission. Included in the agenda is the application submitted by Ms. Steckler requesting to permit home burials in the Terrace Streetscape zoning district and allow exemptions from concrete grave liners based on spiritual beliefs. Chapter 27 zoning defines cemetery as land used or dedicated to the burial of the dead, including mausoleums, necessary sales, and maintenance facilities. Cemeteries are permitted as a principal use in the RA zoning district and as an accessory use in the RR zoning district. Zoning ordinance does not include a definition or regulations for home burials. The zoning administrator has determined the definition of cemetery applies to home burial, which only permits it in those districts that I listed earlier. Staff has included in the agenda a report that was presented to Planning Commission summarizing the existing regulations in the Township Code, as well as regulations to consider if the board would like to move forward with that request, as well as a memorandum summarizing the Planning Commission's discussion from their meeting that was held on May 23rd. So essentially, May 23rd, Planning Commission met, they reviewed that amendment request in relation to the permitted uses in that zoning district for the Terrace Streetscape District, and recommended to the Board of Supervisors denial of the text amendment application due to the establishment and purpose of that zoning district as included in our zoning ordinance. So in addition, Planning Commission also recommended to the Board of Supervisors to authorize staff to amend Chapter 27 zoning to define home burial and explore regulations related to that use. So there are many attachments included in the agenda, including the application, the memo from Christina Anixtine or Bassett, community planner, summarizing the discussion that Planning Commission had, and as well as that staff report kind of giving a basic foundation of what we have currently to date.
Thank you so much, Jenna. So there's a motion that you can find in your agenda. I'd like to entertain that at this point.
I move that the Board of Supervisors deny the application request for a text amendment to Chapter 27 zoning.
Thank you. Do I have
This
a
is
second?
Patty, I'll second.
Thank you.
This is Tier. I mean, I forgot I was supposed to say my name before that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, discussion on the motion. Tiara, you made the motion that the privilege to discuss falls to you first, should you care to. It's not an obligation, but it's an opportunity. I'm flexing a little, Roberts, so I'm gonna just, if you'd like to comment.
The only comment I have is I will refer to Jenna, and I think that she knows what she's doing, so I go with her recommendation. That's all.
Thank you much. Hillary?
Okay, all of the buttons. Yeah, no, I agree with this motion, and I will vote to deny the application request. I would love to see in the future some sort of amendments or kind of rewriting of whatever this zoning request is, because this sort of natural burial, I think, really means a lot to so many people, and I think could make a pretty significant like environmental impact. And so if there is something that we can do in the future to ensure that we can provide this sort of burial within our township, I would be really interested in that. I obviously, like, I'm still a novice at like understanding what all the zoning ordinances and like what all that entails, but if there's a way that we can like open this up for a conversation and continue this, I would be in favor of that.
Thanks, Hillary. Patty? Got a motion on the table. You're working on the mute. That's cool. No
Yeah,
problem.
sorry, I'm not using my own computer, which I'm not really good with anyway, so this makes it a double challenge. Anyway, yes, I agree with denying the motion. And I actually did listen to the planning meeting discussion on this, and it was a really good one. And yeah, Bill Keogh is on this. And so Bill Keogh made a point that I thought was really important for this particular motion, is that this just doesn't jive with what we envision for that district. The density and having people buried in there, just there's a disconnect there. So Yes, but I agree with Hillary in the sense that I do think that home burials and that sort of thing are something we should probably address since the state has kicked it down to us at the local level and it has come to our attention. So I think we do need to work on some definitions and that sort of thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Patty. And Lisa?
Yep, Patty just said what I was going to say. So the Planning Commission did have a really good discussion on this, and they brought up looking further into those definitions and amending the zoning ordinance to include home burial definition. So I thought, yeah, I appreciated their discussion on this. It was very extensive.
Thank you. I guess I'll comment too on the motion and et cetera. On the motion, yes, I agree with this. I agree with this motion. The counterpoint is that I don't necessarily agree that this whole area is geared to be high density, and I think that is the crux of the disagreement between the residents that live there and then some other actors. So I know that the Planning Commission sees it as high density, but the residents see it as low density. So, however, that's kind of an aside. I still support the motion. This other thing I'm talking about, we're going to work out hopefully in the TSD rewrite. But we have to be open to hearing other narratives. It's a narrow corridor that we've designated, but we've lumped in some houses with Route 26. So anyway, totally another discussion.
And I do see Tiara's hand up.
Yep. I'm going to go to Tiara. Yeah.
I just have another question. Again,
Sure.
I haven't really spoken on this because the whole concept is just it's a lot for me to take in because of where I come from. And this doesn't happen. Nevertheless, does this include animals? And do you have to report or say something? Do you have to say something when you do this if it does include animals? I just wanted to know.
Animals are separate from human remains.
So no one has to say anything. They can just, it's no rules.
If it's a large farm animal, there are some reporting requirements, like a horse or something. I don't want to speak to them because I don't know them. I'll say the wrong thing, I'm sure, but there are some.
Okay.
Yeah.
And never mind. Okay.
No,
yeah.
Go ahead. Okay.
No, I don't think it's relevant to this. So
Okay. Yep. Okay. So right now let's vote on the motion and then we'll have a real quick wrap up of the other stuff that we talked about that's also important. So I guess, yes, I just also want to take a moment and just say that I do wish that we were further along in this process when the applicant brought this to us. Not because of that zoning district, but because of maybe other opportunities that we're going to be able to provide that would have made the decision just a whole different landscape to make that decision in. Anyway, so let's call for a vote on the motion. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, so then just to quickly wrap up, what I heard was, I think a majority of folks would like to, in the future, kind of pursue what the Planning Commission said, maybe some thoughts of our own. What's the best way, Centrise, do you think? Do we direct staff to look into something and then bring it back to us? What would you recommend for that?
Yeah, I think that if the board would like to authorize a motion or make a motion to authorize staff to prepare draft ordinance amendment, if you want to move us in that direction at that speed. Or if you're looking for a future discussion to better kind of work through that discussion to give staff a little bit more direction, I'll look to the board to really make that decision. I'm sure the conversation that's led us to this point has informed Jenna, on everyone's perspective.
Also, it's just like staff time, we always moving policy takes staff time, and
It does.
I've advocated in the past that if we want to do policy at the local level, that we need to hire more staff. But anyway, so I'm having a moment of stress about that while I really want to do this. So,
I'll make a motion.
please.
Okay, I make a motion that we, as a board, bring this at a future date to discuss more of where we would like to go with this issue, to offer more clarity for potential policy to staff.
Beautiful.
This is Hillary. I would second a motion to have a discussion on how we advocate for policy and how that is advocated to staff. Is that?
It's close enough. Yes.
Patty?
You got it. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any more board discussion? I see Planning Commission member Bill Keogh has his hand up, but first I want to just wrap up any more board discussion on this. Okay, Bill, to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment to the board. I agree that we probably have two steps in this further discussion. Step one is a research kind of step. We got to have some idea of what the lay of the land is with regard to this kind of request and how it fits with the township. And only after we get some of that research done by staff, I think then we might even want to have a joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors to receive that research together and see about then forming a motion or a revision to the ordinance that we can all come to some agreement on, having had and heard the same information. And I think your effort, Patty, and what you mentioned leads us in that direction.
Thank you so much, Bill. Okay, we do have a motion and a second on the table. Let's go ahead and vote on that. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any other ayes? Okay. Any opposed, same sign? Motion passes unanimously. All right, so we are on to new business and new business, and we've got the consent agenda. Would anyone care to pull anything from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing nothing, let's entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda and accept the treasurer's report.
This is Patty. I move that we accept the consent agenda and the treasurer's report.
This is Sierra. I second that.
All right, so we've got a motion to approve the consent agenda and accept the treasurer's report. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. And we're on to a discussion on an organizational assessment and analysis of Ferguson Township and authorization to execute agreement. And this will be introduced by Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So provided with the agenda is an engagement letter and services agreement for GovHR to conduct an organizational assessment for analysis and an audit of Ferguson Township's operations. Outlined in the engagement is a brief description of the services that are being proposed, which essentially would support GovHR, the expectation for GovHR to provide a draft report and a final written report with recommendations that essentially would result in this deliverable that would bring a deliverable that would be the result, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I've gotten a little flustered here. So having a deliverable that would put forth an overall summary based on a review and an assessment of the administration office as well as the finance and tax office. And then as part of that deliverable, also include an assessment or the summary of assessment and recommendations for moving forward on how the township could maybe expand or improve on efficiencies, leverage technology that might be available to support the balancing of the competing priorities that we've referenced. Also identify areas to which we could do more cross-training among and within staff within the departments. For example, currently we've traditionally always had an administrative assistant in the administration office, and finance and tax in the last 10 years has not increased staff, with the exception of the administrative assistant that we have in administration office. We've kind of loaned her over to finance and tax to support some of the increased operations that they've done. And by that, it's allowed for a little bit of cross-training, which has been able to support increased, I don't quite want to go as far as to say efficiencies, but have allowed for us to be able to get the work done that's at our, that's within our workload. And so there's an opportunity to see, where are areas that we could do cross-training, where exactly could we leverage the use of technology. Also within this proposed organizational assessment would also include a review of our diversity, equity, and inclusion. Part of the deliverable would then include not just a summary of what initiatives or projects that are being facilitated currently, but more importantly, even identify ways to which we could integrate DEI into our township operations more seamlessly. And also, the succession planning is another big component that I find to be something that would essentially provide additional layers of support. As you look at our senior leadership staff, we have 3 positions at the director level, including the chief of police, that we have leadership that could retire within the next 3 to 5 years. To which have been confirmed that they will retire within the next 3 to 5 years. And so, being a new township manager, of course, I want to continue providing the level of quality of support that the Board of Supervisors has had, throughout the entire history to which we can reference at any given time, and also set up my experience and tenure here with the township successfully, and continue to give the level of support to staff, so we're not juggling with these competing priorities and falling short, to which we kind of mentioned just previously in our last discussion. So I had reached out to GovHR, which was the firm that actually the Board of Supervisors engaged to conduct the manager recruitment, understanding that as part of that process, there may have been some discussions and exposure even just within our process for recruitment. Which is another point to which, when I think of succession planning, of course, we need to focus more pointedly on our leadership positions, but even recruitment and retainment of all employees, we've seen an increased turnover rate in the last 5 to 10 years, and that's pretty costly in itself. So I'll kind of stop there. Of course, within the agenda packet, you can read I believe 5 to 7 pages of the scope of work and a detailed description of the analysis proposed by GovHR. And I ask that the board give consideration and authorize the manager to execute the agreement with GovHR, with the expectation that we'd have a deliverable in time for the operating budget beginning in September, October of this year.
Thanks so much, Centrise. I was thinking a lot about COG while you were talking. I'll reveal why when it's my turn to comment. Thoughts on this item, folks? Or I can comment first if no one has any thoughts to offer right now. Lisa.
I don't necessarily need to go first, but I was just getting finding my hand raise button on here, but I can. Yeah. I'm supportive of this type of organizational assessment. I think it's important and valuable. I would my hesitancy would be in that I think these types of studies are good to plan through the capital improvement program and to look ahead and say, okay, this is where we're going to invest in this study and be able to use that information in the following year, and you plan ahead in that way. In this case, I think that the timeliness is important that we move ahead now, given that we have a new township manager. I think when we did the salary study, I want to say in 2020, I'm not remembering 2020, 2019. This would have gone well with that. So it's I guess a little bit of a shame that we didn't do this at that time, but it wasn't done. So I think given the circumstances we're in right now, this makes sense to do this now instead of waiting until I guess early next year.
Well, I was thinking of COG because, they've been adding administrative positions, and they said they were talking about it for many years, and I was like, well, I never heard of it before. Many hadn't heard of it before because there wasn't really a written plan about it, that kind of a thing. So I'm appreciative that we're doing this, that we're planning in this way. We're all growing, and we have to acknowledge that, but I'm glad that we're looking at it in a strategic manner. I also support this. Anyone else care to comment at all? If not, we'll go ahead and, Patty.
No, I was just going to read the motion.
Okay, let's do.
Okay, I move that, this is Patty, I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize the manager to execute an agreement with HR USA for an organizational assessment and audit of the township's operations in the amount not to exceed $25,000.
Thank you.
This is Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you. That was a second from Lisa. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Sorry, I should have just taken that first. Just gotta practice that. Okay. Any further board discussion? Okay.
I did just
Bill-
want, oh, sorry. I did want to
Bill's-
add,
Sorry. you
sorry,
go.
I don't know if you wanted the rest of board comment before or not. Okay. That I thought it was an important part of the proposal, that it's going to specifically look at the use of technology and not simply, hire new hires. And so I think that's something that should be emphasized in that. We've recently gotten some new software and finance department that's proved really valuable. And so there are these tools out there now that I think a company like GovHR can really help us investigate and take advantage of.
I'm glad you said that, because also Tracer falls into that category, because our efficient operations then coinciding with COG efficient operations in code, and if parks pick that up, it would be probably very, very helpful. I know there's a lot of inefficiencies there, so that's a really good thing to point out. Bill?
Sorry, I was writing. I think this is a fabulous idea, and I would like to ask the question of Centrice, would this include the ABCs and their roles and operation, along with the employee, staff group? And if it does not, I would encourage the board to add a few $1,000s to the contract so that we pull in that whole big family rather than just staff, because I think utilization of our ABCs could be an important part in filling some gaps in some places.
Bill, I don't disagree with you, but I'm gonna go one further. I'm gonna say I think that should be a whole separate thing. That's a larger organizational study, but that's just me saying that. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Centuries, it does not include anything like that, right? Or
That
does
is
it?
correct. As of now, the scope of work does not include an assessment for an analysis of the ABCs. I do, however, want to acknowledge that, you know, should this be what I anticipate to be a successful deliverable, that I would also like to see us budget for this to happen, to phase in the other departments, right? So the focus for this request is for the administration, finance, and tax office. I'd also like to discuss, when it comes time for operating budget discussions, that we identify, you know, maybe public works and or planning and zoning, or maybe it's the ABC operations as well. So I fully anticipate that we'll have a good, productive experience and engagement with GovHR, and should that be the actual experience that we do have, that I'd like to revisit this when we're discussing the 2023 operating budget, and at which point I will include the ABCs as well, if the board desires that.
Interesting stuff. Thanks. All right, I've got myself in trouble now. We do have a motion and a second on the table. Yep. Okay, let's call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Can you just remind us of the vote, please? Thank you.
Sure. What we're voting on right now? Yes. To engage, to authorize the manager to execute an agreement with GovHR. Yep. To do the work assessment. Okay. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. And motion passes unanimously. And we are on to a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, ratifying a tentative agreement with the Teamsters Local Union 764 on behalf of the Ferguson Township Public Works Department to constitute an initial collective bargaining agreement for an effective term beginning January 1, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2024. Introduced by Ms. Century Smartin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Provided with the agenda is a copy of a resolution advertised for public hearing ratifying a tentative agreement to constitute an initial collective bargaining agreement between Ferguson Township and the Ferguson Township Teamsters Local Union 764. The Township and the Teamsters have conducted good faith negotiations, and the ratification of the tentative agreement by both parties will formally conclude this process with the expectation that all parties do sign. The term of the contract is 3 years, ending in December 31st, 2024. Also provided with the agenda is a copy of the tentative agreement, which includes the terms to be incorporated into the collective bargaining agreement following adoption of this resolution. I also would like to add 2 other items. One, for the board members who are unaware, let's make that 3 other items. But starting with the first, for the board members that are new and maybe either unaware or less familiar with, the township's actually been in negotiations with the Ferguson Township Public Works Department Teamsters group since, I want to say, March of 2021. So we've been at this for quite some time. I also too want to share with you that Attorney Joshua Hausman is here to answer any appropriate questions that may be had during this meeting prior to the board making a motion. And 3, most significant and worth noting and sharing with all of you is that I believe that at the end of our negotiations, we held a 7-hour negotiation session last Wednesday, which I thought was not only productive, but actually ended in such a way where all parties around the table were positive and energetic. And so as the township manager, you know, I feel really good about that, because I don't feel like there was any tactic to which made anyone feel like they had to sign or they were pushed into this. I believe that you, as the board, can be proud that you have staff members that were able to not just do this in good faith, but actually be able to do this with good energy, and the outcome was very positive from my position. But of course, Attorney Joshua Hausman is here representing you as the board, and certainly can answer your questions. And with that, I'll conclude my comments on this item. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Century. So this is a public hearing, so let's do this. Let's open the public hearing and have public comment, and then we'll go to questions for our attorney if we have any. Then we'll take a motion, have any discussion, and round it up with a roll call vote because it's a resolution. So let me open the public hearing. Is there any comments from the public? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Do we have any questions for Attorney Hausman? Okay.
This is easy.
Yeah.
This is
All
great.
right, seeing no questions, I'd like to entertain a motion.
This is Hillary. I would like to recommend the motion that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution ratifying the tentative agreement with the Ferguson Township Teamsters Local Union 764 and direct the township manager to execute a collective bargaining agreement containing such terms between the township and the Teamsters Local Union 764.
This is Tiara, I second that motion.
Thank you much. Any discussion on the motion? All right, then I'll just say thank you so much, everyone, for working on this. It's something I think that we can be proud of. I am very happy that we're bringing this to, I don't want to say it yet. Is this the final conclusion? Knock on wood. I'm so superstitious. Knock on wood. No. Many thanks to all involved for this effort, this sincere effort for us to be one big family and really treat each other well and support our workers and our residents, and so thank you. So if there's no other discussion, let's see, we're going to take a roll call vote. So I'm going to ask Ms. Martin
Okay.
for that now.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This is roll call vote, resolution number 2022-11. Ms. Deneni?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes?
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion passes unanimously. All right, great. Thank you all.
One more minute.
Yes.
And I just really want to say, for everything that we do here at the township, it's always with a great deal of appreciation and gratitude for all of our staff members. But I really want to just take a minute and say thank you to Dave Modriker, Angela Kauke, on the side of administration, working through all of this, especially with the transition of a new manager, right? That always comes with, I'm sure, a bit of concern. If I were in their shoes, I would have had concern. And so I really appreciate that their support to get me on board and then also continue with the path forward. I also want to extend a note of appreciation to Joshua Hausman. His support and his legal expertise has been really helpful and informative, and his guidance has been it's been really good to have as we push through all of this. I think it's appropriate to also go ahead and give our former manager, David Probolka, some acknowledgement. He certainly started us out. And all of the other staff members, right, 7 hours in closed doors negotiating. It took a lot of time, a lot of resources, and it really just extended for maybe even 2 days. And we were able to do that because we have such great staff at every level within all the departments, being able to kind of pick up what we weren't able to do while we were negotiating. And so many thanks to all of them. Too many to name, but every single staff person allowed for us to be able to have good energy, focus, and attention to get it done. So, and that also goes to the Public Works Department staff, the union representatives that were in that meeting room as well. It took a lot of, again, energy and time on their end to truly represent the Ferguson Township Public Works Department, particularly the positions that are now part of the union. So, from the manager, I just wanted to say thank you publicly and give some acknowledgement to everyone involved. Thank you.
Really well said, Centuries. And I see a few of these, every now and then, and I would rank, our committee and their effort, amongst the better I've seen, and if not, amongst the best. So, thank you for everybody's efforts here, and, I think it's a result that, you guys should be, proud of, satisfied, with, and, provides, real mutual benefit, to the employees and to you guys, for your operations moving forward in this new world of having a unionized public works department. But I can't say it any better than Centuries did. So thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you. Eloquent with a capital E, Centuries. Dave Modricker.
Since Centuries is thanking all of us, I want to publicly thank her for helping to bring it across the finish line. And all of Moshe's hard work.
Thanks,
And
Dave.
Wonderful energy.
I'm glad we're at the point that we are. I really am. It's better than the point we were a year ago. So I appreciate everybody's help.
Fantastic. All right. Okay, we have already voted. Okay, good. We're ready to move on. Thank you all so much. And we are on to the discussion on Spin e-bike share program partnership and review of the Spin micro-mobility share program agreement introduced by Jenna Wargo.
Thank you. Penn State Transportation Services has partnered with Spin, a San Francisco-based micromobility unit of Ford Motor Company, to offer Penn State and state college communities a new bike share program. There's approximately 300 Spin electric assist bikes, as we refer to them as e-bikes, that are available across campus and in neighboring municipalities to offer both Penn State and community members convenient access to those bikes. Users are able to see all e-bike locations on the Spin app, as well as service areas, no-ride zones, and the location of preferred parking spots. The Spin e-bike users must be at least 18 years old to ride. They are all encouraged to wear a helmet while riding. Penn State students, employees, and local community members with limited incomes may apply for the new Spin Access program, and that provides discounted fares for those who qualify. Ferguson Township is the most recent municipality joining in on the partnership with Penn State, the Borough State College, and Patton Township. Provided in the agenda is a copy of the Spin Micromobility Share Program Agreement for review. Township staff will work with Spin on identifying deployment locations for e-bikes, parking points, and geofencing zones, including the no-ride zones, slow ride zones, and no park zones. I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe I saw Cicely on as well. She works with us for Penn State and in collaboration with us on this program.
Thank you so much, Jenna. There is a recommended motion in your agenda. Let's begin with that.
This is Lisa. I'll move that the Board of Supervisors authorize staff to move forward with the Spin Micro-Mobility Share Program.
Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. Welcome, Cicely. Thank you for being here. Is it Cecily?
Yeah, Cecily, thank you.
Cecily, thank you. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Let's see, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions? Any discussion? Patty.
I just want to say I'm actually really excited about this because in my neighborhood, Cicely, does Patton Township already use it? Because I see these bikes in my neighborhood all the time. Like they're coming from Viro Boulevard through to the McKee Street bike path.
Is that recent or was that when the program first started?
I want to say it's been recent, maybe. I mean, and people just may use that that particular. My neighborhood is a cut through to get over to Colonnade and things like that. If they're riding bikes out there, I don't know, but I know that they can.
Oops, sorry.
Bikes in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I know that they can currently ride through, but they can't end trips. Although if you're seeing bikes just laying about, let me know.
Oh, no, I'm not seeing bikes laying about. I'm
Oh,
seeing
okay.
cyclists going through.
Yeah, so they're able to bike through it, but it's about I think the agreement's more about adding access points so that it's more feasible for commuting and, you know, errands and things like that. But it's great to hear that you're seeing folks using them, even though it's not totally established in that area yet.
Right. No, I just think it's because Viro, you know, sometimes those buses get so crowded, it's another option that people use, and it's a pretty easy bike ride right from Viro over to campus. So
Especially with the electric assist. It's definitely fun. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm always thinking about connecting Pine Grove Mills, and I know the focus of this is, of course, going to be targeting students. I guess I could go as far as that, even though community members, I don't know, the area that you might be more likely to find them might be more heavily populated by students. So Pine Grove Mills might not be like a candidate for an access point, is what I'm proposing.
It could be.
Anyway,
we can
if
talk more.
You know, the board has been working really hard and diligently just to connect Pine Grove Mills with the mothership. You know, we're trying to do that, and we have a lot of difficulty. There's a lot of preserved farms, which of course we love, but there's barriers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we're focused on that. So I guess I'll just say that. And if this program included that, I think that the residents would really just love that. And people would be willing to try to give you a place to locate something. Like, I'm just speaking broadly, not for anyone, but they're very pro this. So that's all.
I'm glad to hear that. You know,
Yeah.
it's really more about the community as a whole. You know, it's not just about students, it's about the community as a whole.
Well,
Students make a huge part of it, but like
yeah.
for Penn State.
Well, in most, I mean, in both the Northland study that we did, which is Patty's neighborhood area, we focus on like pedestrian and bike kind of connectivity, and in the Pine Grove Mill small area plan. So like, if you want to justify more grant money or something, you can excerpt right out of those plans to get us anyway, I'm just like this idea a lot. So anything we can do to support it, that would be great. And thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss more if you want to set up the call. Yeah, definitely interested.
Excellent. So do we have a motion? I now have talked myself in. Okay, great. All right, we've got a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thanks so much, Cecily, for being here, the work you're doing. Thank you, Century,
Thank you, guys.
for bringing that to us. All right. Okay, let's move on to discussion of the establishment of a multi-factor authentication policy for all staff and authorities, boards, and commissions with access to email account or virtual private network owned by the township, introduced by Ms. Century Smartin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Provided with the agenda is a copy of the drafted resolution, including a draft policy that requires the implementation of multi-factor authentication for all staff and authorities, boards, and commission. Ferguson Township Cybersecurity Insurance, which is Cowbells, which we recently moved to Cowbells because we were unable to stay with our previous insurance carrier because we didn't have MFA, and we have recently learned that the insurance companies are moving toward this requirement. And we were also informed that the expectation is that the requirement from Cowbells, our current insurance carrier, is that we will need to have MFA as part of our cybersecurity system. So staff went ahead and drafted the cybersecurity policy for the board's review. We went ahead and put it in the resolution format so you can have entirely all of it to review. Tonight we're looking for the board to authorize advertising for the public hearing. So at the next meeting, the board can adopt the policy. I'll also end with, I believe every staff member that has an email that they access off-site, as well as every staff member that has access to the virtual private network off-site, has already had the multi-factor authentication downloaded and is using it.
Thank you so much, Centrise. There is a recommended motion in your agenda, which I'd like to entertain now.
I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize staff to finalize and advertise. The words are mixing the draft resolution for public hearing, establishing a multi-factor authentication policy for all Ferguson Township staff and authorities, boards, and commissions with access to the Vital Private Network or a township-issued email account.
This is Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, discussion on the motion. I have no questions or anything to add other than just
Is there
stuff we have to do, yeah.
public comment, or are we?
Let's discuss them on the board first and then we'll go to Bill. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
Nope. Okay, Bill, anything you wanted to comment on? Question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment, as you all know, I rely on this phrase frequently. I'm old. And, the whole cybersecurity stuff and multiple authentications and so on are sometimes confusing.
Yeah.
Just remember that your ABCs are made up of multiple user environments. Some of us are in the country. Some of us don't have good connection capabilities. Some of us don't have the skills of the current younger generation, so that it would be my hope that the township would build in some kind of tech support capability so that we can easily get transitioned and or as users that are having difficulty can continue to participate.
That makes sense.
Just a concern that I have being an older non-tech person.
We don't want to authenticate you right out of your access. No, absolutely not. No. Centrise, did you, I'm sorry, wanted to comment to that? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to comment. Staff has discussed and identified that, the fact that MFA is not necessarily going to be considered user-friendly. And so we will continue to discuss and explore like how we might roll this out in such a way that is very supportive to, which you said it best, Bill, those coming from multi-user environments. I appreciate that phrase. So yes, we will give some thought to that. This evening, it's just a draft for the board to be able to review and discuss. We'll bring it back at a future meeting. Again, while this is not mandated, we do want to have the policy in effect, and when we roll it out for the boards, the authorities, boards, and commission members, which will likely be, in the near future, weeks, months to come, we'll have a strategy to which we are providing that level of support. So thank you for your comment, and we will have a little bit more of a detailed plan when we present this to the board for their consideration to adopt.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a motion on the table. Any other questions, or we're ready for a vote? Looks like we're ready for a vote. All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. And we are on to board member request, discussion of hybrid regular meetings and board member attendance, introduced by Ms. Patty Stevens.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You're up, Patty. Yeah.
I guess what I really just wanted to do is have a discussion about this. And it's sort of timely that it follows on the heels of this dual authentication thing because it's a technology thing. But I think, we all had received that letter from a member of the public a few months ago about encouraging us to get back to traditional in-person meetings and things like that for the township as a means of engaging with the public, etc. And so I just really wanted to discuss with you all in this public format how you all felt about it. And I guess I'll just kick it off by telling you how I feel about it. And in what I presented, I really think that Zoom has revolutionized meetings. And Zoom, I think, offers an opportunity, if you'll look at it through the lens, if you will, of diversity, equity, inclusion, more people an opportunity to participate in local government, be it as observers or somebody who wants to participate. You know, for me as a non-driver, I am so grateful at times for the opportunity to Zoom into a meeting as opposed to having to be there in person. Maybe a single parent would have the same option. I know plenty of my neighbors who are older folks that would probably consider doing more, but they don't like the idea of driving at night, but a Zoom meeting allows them to participate. So I just sort of want to put out there the expectation that accessibility doesn't necessarily mean a physical in-person presence, that it can be a Zoom meeting because this is where the transparency is in our deliberations. And we are accessible through a phone call, an email, etc. And maybe we can meet elsewhere. And I guess that's what I just wanted to say, is that I don't feel like somehow we are neglecting our duties as supervisors by not always being in person. I see the value in that, but I also see the value in respecting equally a Zoom presence as well. And I just wanted to get that discussion going and hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Patty. Thank you. Anyone else want to share next? Because I can share next if nobody else wants to. I really love the flow, the non-restricted flow between virtual and in person. And I just don't want to encumber anyone, staff, electeds, appointeds, residents, visitors, students, anyone, in the manner in which they participate. I think it also has revolutionized what we think about, and it's just exploded participation, and that includes of elected officials, in terms of, when traveling and et cetera. So those are my thoughts. I also think that, yes, very accessible, the farmer's market many weeks, and by appointment, and my cell phone and my home phone. And people have knocked on my door, though I prefer all the other methods before that one. So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
I just want to say I agree with Andy. As a parent with a child, I am currently a single parent, so it is easier for me sometimes to have him here versus picking him up, especially when the meetings go past 9:30. It's easier for him to be somewhere else versus me having to rush and try to get him before that time. For me personally, if I see that the agenda will be somewhat shorter, then I will make it my business to be in person. But other than that, if it does seem to go around the 3-hour range, it's just more feasible for my child. And I know that won't be forever. So just as right now, until I can secure that Tuesday babysitter, whoever's gonna do that for me. So until then, I'll do that. But I definitely do agree. It does give people more options to attend. So yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Lisa.
I would just agree with the comments that have been made. I don't think I would ever want to lose that hybrid format that we've established now, particularly for public participation. It's just opened the door for so many people to be able to view and interact with us in these meetings from home for whatever reason. And, you know, I think there are some things we will need to work out, the, you know, intrusions on the meetings that we've had in the past, and there's probably better ways to format these meetings now, that particularly because we're, the meetings are live on CNET, and so if there's a different way to either have a webinar versus a Zoom meeting where people can drop in, or require registration like the COG meetings do, you know, whatever we can do to, because I know that's very difficult for staff to manage when there are those intrusions, and it's something, you know, we could work to get rid of, hopefully, you know, not have to deal with that. You know, and I know I'd also throw out weather as an obstacle to coming to some meetings when it's late. You know, I know personally that's one reason I've missed meetings before, is due to bad weather or traveling. I remember when Prasenjit was on the board and was in another country and zoomed in to participate in a meeting. So it just allows that flexibility as opposed to having to miss meetings for that reason. So I'm appreciative that we have these owls now, so that the meetings are much more smoothly managed in this hybrid manner. So, yep. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I think this is a great opportunity to just share that there is what I'll call low-hanging fruit in terms of a response to the Zoom bombing that we experienced at the last meeting. So, you know, I want to share with the board, there's a feature with Zoom where we can actually limit virtual attendees from being able to speak without, I believe the process is like they raise their hand and we have, as a staff member, we unmute them. So we could, I mean, there's a variety of things that we could discuss and move forward, but that's something that I've been given consideration. We could certainly do a registration, wouldn't be too difficult, but there would be some additional steps to integrate. I think if we want to try and alleviate the issues that we had with the sudden intrusion from a Zoom bomber, for example, one simple solution is simply just disabling that feature. So, but what I'd have to experience and do a trial with is to see if that would also be the board, which would obviously not, like if I can select certain participants that could go ahead and just speak freely without needing to be unmuted. If that is the case, that is something that I wanted to put into effect. But of course, I will not do that if I can't limit that to not include the board members. Alternatively, we can discuss webinar options as well.
Right. Interesting. Okay, any further discussion on this? We don't have any recommended motion, or is there a recommended motion? Okay. So it's just a discussion. Is there any further discussion or thoughts? Okay, I'm seeing none. Also, did we lose Hillary on the Zoom?
Sure looks like it.
Okay. Is she in the waiting room or anything? We're moving on to a board member request that is her item next. So guess we could move to postpone it to the next meeting, unless somebody has a better suggestion.
Maybe we could just move to communications for a moment.
Oh yeah, let's do that first. Great idea. Good. And see if she pops on. Okay, yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move to communications to the board first, and then we'll go back to that item. Anyone have any communications to the board they want to share? Tiara.
Yeah. Okay, you can hear me. Yes. I have a few communications
So let's see the order I'm going to do this. The first communication is a concern or I don't want to say the word complaint, so I'll just say concern that a resident has, and I took some notes. I do yoga, and I'm connected with Yoga Lab, and one of the owners says that they have been trying to get a commercial permit, and they can't do yoga in a park without a commercial permit. But they will not give Yoga Lab a commercial permit, and Parks and Recs says that they do something with yoga, but they won't let them join. So basically, they're going back and forth. They're saying that they need this, and they're going over here and they need that. And so seems like there's some kind of rules or ordinances or something pertaining to specifically yoga, and maybe Parks and Rec is only working with certain yoga studios or something of that sort. I don't know. But all I know is I was told that they've been trying to get a permit for the longest, and some of the parks that they've been trying to get a permit in are Ferguson Township parks, and they want to know how that works. So that's the first communication. I don't know how that, I can talk later and more discussion with people about it, but that was brought to my attention. Is there any questions about that? No.
Let's follow up, Tiara, let's you and I follow up with Centrice on that, and then we'll continue the conversation with the full board and CRPR, et cetera.
Okay, great. And then the next thing I wanted to say, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm not talking out of order, but the next thing I wanted to do is just let the community and the township know about some Juneteenth events happening within the next week. Monday, June 13th. Oh, and all of these events are being hosted by Black to Reality, which is an organization in the community that promotes Black excellence through education, entrepreneurship, and entertainment. Monday, June 13th, there's something at Slow Library called Education Liberation from 2:30 to 4:30. Tuesday, June 14th, there's a Southern High Tea at 3 Dots downtown, 6 to 8. Wednesday, there's a Juneteenth trivia at Webster's Bookstore from 6 to 7:30. Thursday, there is a step show competition. For those who don't know what stepping is, it is a traditional African American type of thing that's done with fraternities and sororities. And that's happening at the State Theater. Friday is a self-tour for the Underground Railroad. And this is happening in Bellefonte, but there's a lot of history within our community. So it's something that if you don't even go on this day, they do have the self-tour. Please feel free to attend. And Saturday is a Juneteenth Southern soiree at the Graduate Hotel at 7. So you can find any of these events on Facebook, YouTube, or email blacktworeality@gmail.com, or go to the link tree black2reality. Yep, and that's it. Thanks.
Nice. Thank you so much, Tiara. That's great. Lots of awesome things to join in there. Wonderful. Thank you. Any other communications to the board? All right. We are then back to the previous item.
I texted Hillary and I haven't gotten a response, so
Okay.
I'm not sure what's up.
I'm having a severe downpour out here. I'm not sure if where she is. I haven't heard of any electrical outages. But I guess I think, we are at the end of the meeting, so we can't bump it any further down. So I think the only thing we can do, in lieu of just moving forward with it, which is her item, so I don't really feel right about that. I think want to entertain maybe a motion to postpone it to the next meeting. Is that okay, Centrice? I know it's like we have big agendas, but I think that would be appropriate. Let's entertain that motion.
Yeah, I move that the Board of Supervisors postpone this proclamation to the next meeting where Supervisor Caldwell can present.
Great. Do we have a second?
This Patty, I'll second.
Thank you. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. And motion passes unanimously. And then we're bouncing back down to calendar items. we've got our fire safety event at Baileyville Hall on June 11th from 10 to 2. So June 11th, let's see, what is that? That is Saturday. That is this Saturday. And then we've got our regular meetings coming up: Parks and Recreation Committee, Planning Commission, Tree Commission, Small Area Advisory Committee. So plenty of meetings to attend and get involved, all open to the public. All right, if there's nothing else, oh, Tiara, I see your hand is up.
Yes, and I just want to say this, not to sound weird, but in the future, when we start planning our events, June 11th is like a big pride thing and a big pride event. And so I don't want us to seem like we're being somewhat insensitive by putting things like this that would interfere with the blocking of their schedule and their programs that they do a really big thing. So for all intents and purposes, this was already planned prior to, so no one knew of this, but I think that maybe in the future we kind of look and try to not do that, if that makes sense, just so no one thinks that we're being insensitive.
That makes sense. I will say, even though this is on our calendar,
Yeah.
it's technically not our event. And that's not me trying to say what you're saying isn't valid. 'cause
That's true.
But
Yeah.
this is a hall planned event that our police are participating in, if I understand correctly. They were participating. Are they still participating? I take it back if they're not.
It was rescheduled as well.
EMS, some emergency responder group is going to be out there. I think the fire folks.
Yeah.
Anyway, point well taken, Tiara.
No, that makes total sense. I know it's on ours, and I don't know if
I wouldn't have thought of it.
we partner with other people in these celebrations or whatever, but I just
Yep.
thought about it.
Yep. If there were a car seat check, I didn't see that there was going to be a car seat check for this. So I don't want to say that the police are going to be there. If there was a car seat check, I would go out and get my car seat checked with some Pride regalia. So just to integrate this.
And it looks like Bill Keogh probably will provide more details. Ferguson Township Police Department will be present, and
Okay.
to the extent that they're doing car seat checks, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty
Okay.
certain Bill might have
All
a
right.
better idea. Thank you.
All right. I might be a Black Mo Shannon anyway. I might have been lying. So, okay. Bill Keogh.
Just to follow up on that, because I am the president of the Baileyville Community Hall. This was a partnership between us and the police department that was scheduled on the last big snow event that we had, and we had to cancel the event. And when you try and pull all of the things and the people together, such as the EMS, fire, police, as Swartz, which handles many of the fire extinguisher stuff, this was the date that it landed on, having no other thought as to anything else going on that particular day. Certainly wasn't by design.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you,
And
Bill.
we will get-
I hope you don't think I implied it was. I don't think that any of us thought about it. I just literally noticed it now. So thank you.
Yeah. It's good to be aware of. All right. Thank you all. So it's the end of the meeting. So it's time to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us throughout this long meeting. All right. Good night.